everyone, and welcome to the February 17th meeting of the Portland City Council. Would you please call the roll?
Fritz?
Here.
Fish?
Here.
Saltzman?
Here.
Novick?
Here.
Hale?
Here. Welcome, everybody. We have 3 items on the afternoon calendar. You're welcome to speak on any of them. Let our council clerk know if you'd like to do that. We will, I don't think have any difficulty sticking to our normal 3-minute timeline for testimony if you're here to speak on the item. With that, I will ask that item 158-1 be read.
Amend Bond Avenue roadway realignments in the South Waterfront District Street Plan, criteria and standards document.
Commissioner Novick.
Colleagues, last week, Council considered changes to the resolution brought to us in December. Changes included shifting the OHSU portion of the alignment north of Southwest Porter to the west, an interim and final design of Southwest Bond north of Southwest Porter, language about the OHSU Commons, and a conceptual adjustment of the streetcar alignment. Potential changes to the alignment south of Southwest Porter on Zidell property will be considered at a later time. Commissioner Fritz also asked to make changes to certain references to the Greenway. Those amendments were circulated to council offices via the Tuesday memo and should be in front of you today. I have one additional clarifying amendment I'd like to add to the resolution. In the first be it resolved, I would move to insert the words phase 1 of before the words exhibits A and B.
Thank you. I'll second that amendment. So the purpose of that amendment, which I had a chance to discuss with your staff, Commissioner, is to make it clear that we're resolving the question of what the shape of the street alignment is in the northerly portion where OHSU is getting ready to begin development, and it's still awaiting further discussions and refinement in the southerly portion, that is phases 2, 3, and 4. So
I apologize. I don't have this in my binder. I'll be right back.
the map, I'm sure they,
Unless somebody else has a copy.
staff, Geraldine is here. There she is. And folks from Peabody are here. There we go. Oh, the resolution itself, sorry.
I was confused because the date is still November 24th, and so it's not, I think what I have is, in fact, is amended. But then
Sorry,
you're putting
Commissioner.
phase 1 in,
Phase 1 is this portion.
okay, got it, thank you.
Everything north of Porter.
Okay,
All right, I got that right?
thank you.
Okay, so any further discussions about the amendment?
Well, can I just get a procedural check, Mayor? I have some questions about the underlying matter. Do we have a presentation?
Yeah, so, well, we certainly have staff available to answer questions, so if
Okay.
you've got some, let's have the appropriate folks come forward from PDC and PBOT.
So this is, just to clarify, this is going back to the original proposal rather than the substitute that was put in on Tuesday of last week. Is that
No,
correct?
that's not correct.
No. So we're amending the substitute, right?
Correct.
So that's the version I have is substitute as amended 21116
Okay,
in a box on the front page of that resolution.
yeah.
So the difference between the substitute and the original differences are?
The original or from last week?
From the last hearing, original.
We struck the language as proposed by Commissioner Fish and Commissioner Fritz in regards to any identification of the Greenway in the whereases and the resolved.
So in the substitute, you've taken out the language which we struck at the last hearing.
Correct.
Got it.
Correct.
Thank you very much.
That's helpful. And So, I just want to make sure that I understand three pieces here. The first is, with the realignment, what is the impact on the width, east to west of the Greenway?
The Greenway per code is 100 feet from top of bank.
Right.
The language in the resolution sets the road back a minimum of 5 feet from that 100-foot setback. So at a minimum, north of Porter, that Greenway would be 105 feet wide.
Okay. And is there,
And there, yes.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
no, you please.
There are areas where it's more than 105, so at a minimum, it's 105.
Okay, so if it, and will it remain 100 feet as development progresses?
I think on the east side of Bond Avenue, there's no development parcel. So one of the issues originally with the alignment is there were two small development parcels on the east side of Bond, between Bond and the Greenway. Shifting the road over eliminates those parcels. So one of the concerns we heard from OHSU, and Brian Newman is here to speak to it if needed be, is that they did not think they would develop those parcels, so they would basically remain vacant property because they're very small.
Right.
So this alignment actually provides a little more space for the Greenway and there are no parcels on that side.
So we preserve the minimum of 100 feet for the Greenway?
Absolutely, yes,
There'll be no intrusions into the 100 feet based on the action we're taking.
correct.
We've taken the language out about any references to Greenway, so we are not deciding the question of sequencing and funding.
Correct.
Correct.
We're deciding the location of a street now,
That
a
is
portion of a street now,
Right.
so that OHSU can proceed with a couple of their projects.
Right.
You've answered my three questions, thank
I
you.
have a question for the mayor as to whether the wiggles have been straightened out to your satisfaction.
No, they have not, and thus the amendment, because the section north of Porter, to me, makes sense, and as a street for the long run. The section south of Porter is still requiring further discussion with Zidell, who's changing some of their plans, and the city, in my opinion, as I said the last time, certainly needs to work with the Zidell company as a development partner, but we need to decide the location of that and configuration of that street for the very long run in a way that passes a straight face test and doesn't necessarily simply suit the short-term interests of any property owner, including the Zidells. So we will get to that place later on, but we're not getting there now, and that's why we made this amendment that says Phase 1, because Phase 1 is between Porter and the existing River Parkway.
Do we just define Phase 1 somewhere?
It is defined in the exhibit, Exhibit A. It's just if it's in black and white, it's really hard to see which phase is which.
Okay, but you're comfortable with that
Yeah,
language?
it is shown in the color version of Exhibit A that Phase 1 is the portion between Porter and River Parkway.
The other concern I had outstanding from the hearing back in November or December was the issue of whether we could encourage, in that special design of the street, encourage handicap parking along the Greenway so that there's more, so that really does increase accessibility for people who have mobility concerns. So I'll just put that back on the table and as going forward. Thank you for working with all of our staffs over this past week.
Any other questions? Thank you both. Okay, this is a previous agenda item. Unless there's any public testimony on this item, I think we now take a vote on it, right?
On the amendment?
On the amendment first, and then on the resolution. Yes.
Fritz?
Aye.
Fish?
Aye.
Saltzman? Novick?
Aye.
Hales?
Aye. And now on the resolution itself?
Fritz?
So thank you, Commissioner Novick, Mayor Hales, and staff for the revised resolution wording that does help clarify the questions that I had with the earlier versions. the development in this area is a very complex sequence of projects and involves several sources of funding. The realignment will benefit the Greenway in terms of improving public access and visibility to the waterfront and keeping development further away. I hope that there will be some consideration of step down on the other side of the street with the development of the OHSU parcels to make sure that the Greenway and the step down is respected. It's my understanding that the special design area improvements in the Bond Avenue right-of-way will not be constructed until either the Greenway or OHSU Commons is built, and that the interim Bond Avenue construction will not require Greenway development nor any of the funds earmarked for Greenway development. The development agreement for the Zidell property envisions that the Greenway construction in approximately 2020 to 21 at the earliest. It's dependent upon tax increment financing revenue from structures to be built. And the price tag of a little over 11 million was stated as adequate for this section of the Greenway. This is less than the section that Parks and Environmental Services recently completed, in part because the stretch here has already been done with a cap by Zidell. It didn't include any in-river work or any bank restoration, which our project did. So it'll be an interesting walk or cycle or stroll or roll for folks going along the Greenway to see the version that the government did that really does respect all of the wildlife habitat, and the version that was been done privately, which certainly takes care of the capping, and we appreciate the Zidell working with environmental services on it, but perhaps is not as spectacular as our piece. The Greenway Master Plan and update that gets underway this calendar year is being led by Portland Parks and Recreation and will coordinate closely with transportation, OHSU, Zidell, local residents, and the public at large to ensure a good outcome from a design perspective, which is what the Design Commission is recommending. Thanks to all. Aye.
Fish?
Commissioner Fritz previewed her comments before this hearing, and I second them. And the questions that have been addressed at the hearing were our concerns. But I'm going to channel Steve for a second. And when Commissioner Fritz turned to the mayor and said, "Have we worked out your Wiggles problem?"
Has nothing to do with dancing. Yes, right.
I had a Steve Novick moment. And I took out my phone, and it brought back a flood of memories because my son's favorite band was called the Wiggles. And he was born about 12 years ago. And his favorite song was the one that you're all familiar with, which was the classic Yummy Yummy. And Mayor, do you still have a problem with the Wiggles?
Even less now.
Okay. Aye.
It's contagious.
Saltzman?
Aye.
Novick?
I would, first of all, I really appreciate everybody's work. I'd like to join Commissioner Fish in admonishing the mayor about his concern about Wiggles, particularly when it relates to roadways, because I think we all remember that in the most famous discussion of a crooked roadway of all time, there was a crooked man and he walked a crooked mile. He found a crooked sixpence against a crooked stile. He bought a crooked cat, which caught a crooked mouse, and they all lived together in a little crooked house. So crooked roadways can sometimes lead to positive results. I just ask you to keep that in mind in the future.
Hales?
Thank you for all indulging my concern about this, and I'll take all that good humor in a good humored way. But just want to reiterate that it is important to get this right. I think we are, so thank you. Appreciate everybody, again, taking a little extra time to measure and then cut. Had a chance to visit Rome for the first time, and reminded me of something that in planning it's important to remember, which is every now and then we get to decide where streets go. You know, we're deciding how to pave and repair the ones that we have, but every now and then we get to decide where new ones go. We got to do that in the Pearl District. We're getting to do that here. We might get to do that again a time or two somewhere else in the city, especially after we do this comp plan and we adopt future street plans for parts of the city that weren't developed particularly well the first time around. The hotel I stayed in happened to be across the street from the Pantheon. That building was built and the street was located in 128 AD. The building's still in use. Cities decide lots of things. When we decide where a street goes, I have no idea when that decision ever gets changed. Because if you look around, again, we'll get a rare second chance with places like 82nd Avenue where there wasn't a good grid put in place the first time. But it is a very long-term process when we decide where a street goes. So buildings last a long time. They last longer than people do. Streets last longer than that, with the rare exception of something like the Pantheon. Let's only hope that OHSU builds buildings that last that long. There's a challenge for you. Aye. Thank you. Okay, 159.
Accept the annual report from the Age-Friendly Portland Initiative.
Commissioner Fish.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm very pleased today to kick off a Year 2 progress report from our friends at Age Friendly Portland. And just by way of background, in 2013, the City Council accepted an action plan for an age-friendly city. And that action plan contained 10 different areas of focus. And we have officially designated Age Friendly Portland as our partner in implementing a number of those recommendations. And this, of course, all flows from a very proud decision a number of years ago of the World Health Organization to give us a very special designation as an age-friendly city. This is the second year progress report coming to council. I was going to introduce Alan Del Torre, but he's
He's still here.
sweet-talking our clerk. Alan, if you could just join us for 1 second.
Yes, absolutely.
Alan is going to introduce the panel, and we've set aside 30 minutes for a brief overview. And also, let me just say at the beginning, deeply appreciate Commissioner Fritz and Mayor Hales for their support, and my council colleagues for the funding in our last budget. This is not just any group. This is actually our officially designated age-friendly partner. And so we're very proud of that relationship, and this year we made an investment in housing for older adults and accessibility, and we look forward to the fruits of that work. But today we're going to get Year 2 report. Alan, welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner Fish. And I'd like to say that as of yesterday afternoon, we finally executed the contract. It took only a month and a half. Sometimes there's red tape between governmental organizations, but it's on the books now, both at Portland State. I'd like to introduce the presenters today. To my right, Barbara Bernstein, the Executive Director of Elders in Action. Margaret Neal, who's the Director of the Institute on Aging at Portland State University, and Vandana Shrestha, who's a jack of all trades with AARP Oregon. She does a lot of different things with the group, and we'll turn it over to Margaret to get started. Although the reason I was at the clerk's desk was we're waiting for the presentation to be populated. I don't know if it's ready to go just yet.
He's
We'll
sending
go
it round. It'll
Okay.
be a minute.
We'll go forward without
Okay.
it. So we are very pleased to be here at this time to report on our last year's work with the Age Friendly Portland Advisory Council and the Age Friendly Portland Initiative. It began back in 2006 as a part of a research project with the World Health Organization, and we've been working since that time on making our community more age-friendly with a variety of partners. And the effort is organized through an Age-Friendly Advisory Council with our key partners, Elders in Action, AARP Oregon, and a number of other partners who make this all work together. The Institute on Aging is serving the role as a backbone organization, striving for collective impact, but that requires one organization at least to pull all the pieces together, and that really has been our role. As Commissioner Fish mentioned, the council approved the action plan for an age-friendly Portland back in 2013. And there are 10 domains of action in that action plan. They include housing, transportation, outdoor spaces and buildings. Those comprise their sort of built environment piece of making a community age-friendly. Then we have social participation, respect and social inclusion, civic participation and employment, communication and information, and community support and health services. Now, if you were counting, that was only 8. In our effort here in Portland, we pulled apart civic participation and employment so that we could focus on employment and economic development and have a special focus on that in our community. And also we pulled apart health services and community services because they were such big domains and we wanted to be able to focus on those independently. So our council decided that we couldn't act on all of those domains at the same time. So in 2014, we identified three priority areas: civic engagement, employment and the economy, and housing. And then in 2015, we added two more, health services, prevention, and equity. It used to be just called health services, and transportation. Thank you. And so the key accomplishments
Carla.
that we've had, thank you very much, in the last year fall into three general areas. One is governance. One is providing education and raising awareness, and another is in the area of policy development. And each of those areas touch the different domains that we've identified as a council to work on. So highlighting some of the highlights with respect to governance, in October of 2014, Multnomah County decided to join the age-friendly movement, and its board of county commissioners made a resolution to adopt the same areas of action as Portland had adopted, and then to work on developing its own action plan. They also agreed to have our Age-Friendly Portland Advisory Council serve as the advisory council to the Multnomah County effort. So one of the things we did as a council is change the name of the advisory council to the Age-Friendly Advisory Council of Portland and Multnomah County. Another thing that we did that was very important, and I believe it was your suggestion that we do this, Vandana, as an advisory council member, we adopted a charter. And so we spent some time working through the various elements of how we wanted to govern this initiative, and we set that forth in writing, and that's an appendix in the report that you have. The next example of an accomplishment within the education and raising awareness area is the Aging Well Conference that we had at Oregon Health and Science University with all of our partners on October 3rd. There were about 140 people there, and it was targeted to consumers and community members. We had sessions on housing, on brain health, on volunteering, physical activity, nutrition, end-of-life care, and county-based resources for adults. So it was a pretty broad-reaching effort, and at the end of it, we all took a walk across the Telecom Bridge, which was lovely. We had another event in October called What Are Old People For? This was our sort of follow-up event to the first annual event. This time it was held at Warner Pacific College, and Commissioner Fish served as the Master of Ceremonies for that event. It was keynoted by a woman named Dr. Janet Taylor, who's a community psychiatrist in New York City, very well-known individual, and talked a lot about equity and about the value of older adults and the contributions that they make to our community. And we have planning underway right now for a 2016 event in the fall that'll be focused on intergenerational opportunities for engaging younger and older adults together. Another awareness-raising effort that we engaged in was actually conducted with funding from Grantmakers in Aging. And what we did is we developed a case for age-friendly communities. This case statement will be released, I believe, next week. We have the proofs for it right now. And this was really prepared as a document that would pull together the existing research that pertains to why we should bother creating age-friendly communities. And it looked across all the domains that we mentioned, and we presented that research evidence. It has something like 300 footnotes. So it's very well documented, and it focuses on the following areas: the economic benefits of age-friendly communities, the social capital benefits in terms of older adults who volunteer, as well as who make charitable contributions, the opportunities related to housing, opportunities related to physical infrastructure, the health benefits, not just for older adults, but for people of all ages and abilities, for having a community that works, and a variety of other benefits. And then another area in which our council made contributions was with respect to the city's comprehensive plan. The advisory council members reviewed the plan. We submitted verbal and written testimony, worked with community partners to provide additional input. Dr. De La Torre was selected to participate as a policy expert in the Policy Expert Group on Neighborhood Centers. And he's also a member of the Residential Infill Project to assist in addressing aging and accessibility issues in housing. I'll turn it over to you, Barbara, now.
Thank you. Elders in Action comes to the Age-Friendly Portland collaboration through the commitment of the City of Portland to civic engagement. We really appreciate your support and the Office of Neighborhood Involvement. In addition to being an active member of the Age-Friendly Advisory Council and assisting in joint projects, keep that. I'm going to go through those individually, sorry. The age-friendly projects that you talked about, our programs also fit in within the domains of the age-friendly cities. So we prioritize our programs based on the issues of most concern to older adults that we hear from every day. We hear from about 3,000 older adults in our community. And the 4 areas of major concern right now are housing, not a surprise, I suppose, affordable housing, identity theft, scams and fraud, transportation, and isolation and neglect. And the first slide you see here is one of our responses to the identity theft, scams, and fraud issue. We are collaborating with the Oregon Department of Justice, APS, and local law enforcement to create fraud panels that you see there. And Commissioner Fish participated in one. Thank you very much. The audience is about 40 to 50 people, and they're there, and they get to talk to their service providers directly, hear about resources of support, and to learn about prevention to those issues. The next slide shows a group of older adults headed down to Salem to advocate for affordable housing in response to the number of calls that we're getting from older adults who are being priced out of their homes and can't afford the large rent increases or experiencing no-cause evictions. We decided that we wanted to educate ourselves about how to be better advocates for this. And so we created a series, a session to help older adults be their best advocates. So those who had experienced housing insecurity, and then we created a partnership with REACH, Home Forward, the Urban League, Fair Housing Council, Oregon Opportunity Network, Northwest Pilot Project, to put together a series in which we could become better housing advocates. And this included that trip to Salem that you see there, and also participating in the Fair Housing Council's discrimination tour, which gave us a little bit of a historical perspective on the issues facing us today. The next slide shows, that was one of the activities too, one of our volunteers. This one is it's the opening of the Orange Line. So we participate in those community events also, but that represents our commitment to transportation issues. And as an example, we work with Ride Connection to recruit volunteers for their rideshare program, and that teaches older adults to navigate and use the public transportation system when their own individual transportation systems, or when they can't drive anymore, essentially. The next slide is, again, the housing project. That's the bus tour there. We had about 50 people participate in that event. And then finally, I think, this is the age-friendly business certification program, which most of you probably know about. This started as a program by Elders in Action volunteers who felt themselves becoming invisible to their own community. So they created a program that educates businesses about how to serve and create friendly environments for the older adults so they can continue to participate in their communities. This reduces the impact of social isolation on the individual and the community. And it's a great way to engage older adults in creating the kinds of communities they want to live in. In 2013, we started to do this program a little bit differently, and we're engaging business districts. So we have engaged the Hillsdale Business District, Lloyd District Center, the mall, and the district. And we train a group of volunteers and then go out to a group of businesses, and then together they are talking about best practices about how to serve the older adult. And we're using this system to do the 19 libraries in the Multnomah County Library System. So they, instead of us going in, our volunteers going in and doing the certification process, they're recruiting their own volunteers, and then they have champions within their system to continue to promote age-friendly activities. The library's already great, but it's been a really important and engaging conversation to have.
What were some of the findings, some of the most common things that people could improve?
Well, each library is a little bit different. So for instance, Selwood, they've moved their hold, little things like this. So they've moved their hold shelves to the back of the library, and you have to go down a very narrow kind of hallway that they've created. It used to be at the front of the library, so that has challenges for people with disability and just kind of those kinds of things. So that sort of thing. The library already has great programs. They're reaching out to older adults. They're delivering books. Their service is really very good, but those kinds of individual libraries might have had things like that.
And what were some of the things in the businesses that people should be thinking about but don't?
Thank you for asking. Well, benches in places of business. That's a way for anybody to rest, to be there, to not have to stand while they're waiting. So that might be one thing. Signage was a big thing. We did Providence, a Providence hospital, and the signage was really very confusing. The facilities management people had already identified these problems, but it wasn't until the volunteers came in to advocate for that the administration took notice. So I think having advocates of people in the community saying the things that maybe we already know but haven't the will to make change helps those things change.
It's terrific to have your volunteers, because both of those examples are things that everybody can use a bench to sit down on when they're tired of waiting for whoever's shopping, and everybody can use better signage. So the fact that your volunteers are out there and are respected and doing this certification is a great example of how making everything more accessible makes it more accessible for everybody.
Thank you. And you will be really happy that it's now called age-friendly program instead of the elder-friendly program because of that very thing.
Yeah.
So that, I think we also did the evaluation of the new water customer flyer. And I think in 2016, we have a really great opportunity to continue to do the work that is a collaboration between theory, policy, and practice.
Can I just put a little plug in on that?
Sure.
Mayor, I hope it's something we can each year bring all the bureaus into this conversation. We had a brochure at the Water Bureau that outlined discount programs. And it was small print, was a small document, and it was very hard to read. And so we showed it to our friends at Elders in Action and said, could you help us recast this so that it's more accessible to older adults? And they said, well, the font is wrong, the layout's wrong, it's unfriendly, and so you said
Maybe
it very
we said it more diplomatically, I hope.
Right, and we got a whole list of things, so we redid it. And we submitted it, and we got back another 2 pages of single spaced. And like one of the comments they made was, there's like 6 or 7 phone numbers on the brochure. And if you're an older adult and maybe not, you don't read as well and you're confused about how to interact with government, 6 or 7 numbers just makes it harder. So where's the one number, the one person that's accountable? And also, we had some disclaimers about do's and don'ts, and it was deemed to be off-putting because the disclaimers were positioned in such a way that it looked like we were making accusations rather than saying, fair warning, these are some lines. And so we redid it. We increased the size by 50%, which was a modest cost factor, blew up the font, and we've gotten a great response from it. And frankly, without their input, it wasn't clear to me all the ways in which it fell short. And I hope it's a resource that we can all use, because a lot of our a lot of the customers that we're serving are older adults, and many of them have the same issues, including vision. And we have to be responsive to them. And so I can't thank you enough. It actually changed my thinking about a lot of things.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, there is one more picture.
There is.
But that's it, I'm done.
I have just a few slides. Again, I'm Vandana Shrestha with ARP Oregon, and it's just a great pleasure to be here. And I want to start by saying thank you so much for having us come back and do this report. It's great to have leadership and commitment from the city council, from the mayor, and Commissioner Fish, your leadership has been great and great support to the work that we're trying to do collectively. And I think there was a slide that Margaret had which talked about collective impact, which is that, we together as a community of partners, of stakeholders, of advocate groups, we're working together to really work towards making our city age-friendly. And I think you said it right. It's not just about, one specific group. It really is about age-friendly for all ages, even though we start with older adults, maybe because we are ARP, for instance, or Elders in Action, or because we're Institute on Aging. But I think the work we're trying to do is really about creating sustainable communities. And I don't think I need to say that much, but I think what we have seen is that the shared interest between what we are advocating for, because we think it's going to be good for people 50 plus, and what we see, we share interests with lots of other groups who are also thinking about their constituents. For AARP, our interests are very similar to what Elders in Action is, but I'll tell you a little bit about our connection to the work that's going on also around the state. Because we're AARP, we're championing age-friendly communities and the network of age-friendly communities around the country. Margaret mentioned the WHO, and obviously Oregon and especially Portland has been doing this work since 2006. And we, as ARP, have been very proud to be a partner and support of that work. But a few years, about 6 years, or 4 or 5 years ago, ARP nationally became an affiliate affiliated with WHO and the Age-Friendly Global Network, and is now really championing the Age-Friendly National Network. And when it began, there were only 7 communities, and Portland was, of course, one of them. And now it's grown to 75 communities around the states, and they represent cities mid-sized like ours to large metros, from New York to LA to really small towns, and variety of communities around the states. And I think that just speaks to the good work that has begun in Portland and how others are learning from it. So I think we have a lot to be proud about. And even in this past year, I know for AARP, we've been very pleased to be part of a cohort of organizations and advocates being able to do certain new things. For instance, we launched our Neighbor Walks program, which we're really thrilled about. The folks at Peabody Active Transportation have been great supporters of that. We have, volunteers running this walk program. We have had over 500 people participate. We're also doing other things related to advocacy around housing, for instance, speaking up both at local levels as well as statewide, for instance, with the inclusionary zoning. But we continue to also, just like Barbara said, and I think Margaret also mentioned, there are different ways of trying to do this work. And for us, it means advocacy. So we are making sure our volunteers and our 65,000 member strength is heard at City Hall, and as well as at the state level when we try to advocate for the age-friendly policies like safe streets and good, sound funding on resources that are going to make sure that people are able to age successfully. So we appreciate your support, and thank you. I think I have a couple more pictures. Let's see. This is a good one. Of various activities, and the first one is there with Commissioner Fish at our Vital Aging Conference, doing a really great keynote for our attendees. There were about 220 people, and the bottom one is a walk, the Neighbor Walks. It was our first walk in Irvington, and I think we had 100 people show up, which was a shock, but it's been a great success, and it just shows that older adults really want to engage in that community.
You have 65,000 members.
And, aging begins when you're born. So if we go by that and not just the benefits and discounts, you can be a member at any age. So I think that's about it. And the last one is, we were really pleased to do the first. We partnered with Elders in Action and with support from the council to do one of the first Portland Mural Forum in 2012. And Mayor Hales was part of that, along with 2 other candidates, and we hope to do the same, and this is the save the date for you all. Please mark your calendars, and we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you.
Are you going to invite all the candidates?
Right now, we have a policy which says we look at certain polling numbers.
So if I might make a request that you consider inviting all the candidates, something that the Columbia Corridor Association found was that by sending a questionnaire to the candidates and asking everybody who sent the questionnaire back, that meant that some people were not willing to put in the time to send the questionnaire back. So I would suggest that it's hard for candidates who are not well known to get their message out, and that as somebody who has a group that's very inclusive and aware of abilities and disabilities, that something other than polling numbers might be helpful to the democratic process, if you just consider that. Thank you.
Although Commissioner Fritz, I will say, I remember once being on a stage with Josh Alpert and 14 candidates. And I'm not sure it was the most informative forum, but I did get, I think, one question for the evening. But I want to ask you, Charlie, was that an effective forum back in 2012?
It was a very effective forum, so I'm glad you're doing it again, and I want to second Commissioner Fritz's point. In January of 1992, an Oregonian poll showed me at 6%. So I hope the threshold would be lower than that.
It is, I think.
Really? That's a fun fact I didn't know, Charlie.
So it just shows how reliable early polls are.
Right, I know, ours is not until April 2nd, so we have some time.
And we are internationally known now for that candidate
Yes.
forum, because it's featured on the World Health Organization Age-Friendly Globe website.
Yeah, and I know that all the ARP cities where they are working with, like Texas has done that after us, lots of their communities have done it, so it's a good thing.
You mentioned inclusionary zoning, and we've got a big fight on our hands down in Salem, and it's not quite going the way we would like right now. And I think it's worth remembering that when we talk about people at 0 to 30 of median family income, which sounds very social, sounds very wonky, let's put the human face on that. That's a older adult on SSI, and that's a full-time minimum wage entry-level worker. And if we want a community for people of all ages, we have to have housing for both. Entry-level worker, full-time minimum wage, and an older adult on SSI. And they both need housing at 0 to 30% of median family income. And that's one of the reasons I think everyone up here believes this fight in Salem is very important.
Yes, thank you.
I've got just a couple comments, a couple slides left to talk about where we're heading in 2016 and beyond. And want to note that after I did my math, I think I've been volunteering with AARP since I was 26. So all ages are welcome over there at AARP. So our efforts continue to move forward. We're continuing to implement our action plan from 2013. I'd also like to call out very briefly our SVP Social Venture Partner Encore Fellows who are here with us in the audience, Bill Stack and Shailesh Vachani. If you could raise your hands. They've come to us after careers in Portland Public Schools and Intel to continue to further the efforts with age-friendly Portland and Multnomah County, and we're really happy to have them. They've been incredible benefits to the Institute on Aging and to age-friendly in general. As Margaret talked about earlier, Multnomah County is ramping up right now to do their baseline assessment and action plan, and I'd say that in the next year to year and a half, we'll see those unveiled. Also, the City of Portland funding is key for us in moving forward, and I'd say that in some ways you could think about it as seed money. So as I move forward in my efforts as a researcher at the Institute on Aging, I now have the ability to look for additional opportunities for funding outside of government funding to, say, nonprofits and to other organizations that are interested in helping us to implement the action plan, and to also look at exciting ways to further research and to even start teaching in intergenerational classroom and community settings. So I'll talk a little bit about the capstone course at Portland State that we're looking to develop. And if you could advance to the next slide. A little bit about the deliverables and the actions that we're taking as part of the 2016 age-friendly efforts that have been funded from the city. We'll now produce quarterly reports on what's happening with the council and the housing committee, which is being revamped at the moment. The second action is to revise our housing action area. We know that some of the actions there in 2013 were good, but they could be improved upon, especially in light of the current crisis and homelessness issues that we're facing in our community. We also want to identify priorities to increase age friendliness in Portland's housing. This is actually not as easy of a lift as I originally thought. There are both regulatory barriers or difficulties in finding regulation to improve age friendliness in housing, and very intricate incentive-based approaches that we may be able to take. But as Mayor Hales knows, the work of the Residential Infill Project Stakeholder Advisory Committee, there are a number of different players and actors at the table, and finding solutions and bargains is much less easy than some of us anticipated early on. The final piece of the revision of this action plan and the summary of priorities for moving age-friendly housing forward is going to need to be vetted and brought back to the council in some ways. So you've adopted the resolution, by resolution, the age-friendly action plan, but these updates need to be passed through you again. We need your commitment to look at these and to give us advice as we move forward. With respect to the residential infill project, I've been a member of that since its inception, and I will write a briefing in June of this year to describe kind of where the affordable and accessible housing opportunities and challenges are emerging. And I want to point to the two images that are on the screens. These are examples of what are known as stacked flat housing. This is something that's on the table as an alternative housing type. Both of these represent a townhome type development that allows for one single level to be accessible. They're not audacious or hideous. They actually would fit well in the fabric of our communities. And these are examples of ways in which we're able to change through small modifications the way that we're improving Portland's housing stock. And there's support from the Stakeholder Advisory Committee and others to look at these types of solutions. Just to mention very briefly, the Age-Friendly Service Learning Project that is part of the grant that is essentially underway as of yesterday afternoon. We're working with University Studies, which coordinates Portland State's capstone program, to develop an age-friendly capstone project where we're taking undergraduates, around 10 to 12 undergraduates, to do specific projects in the community. And we're actually looking for some input. I had a chance to talk to Jamie Dunphy from Commissioner Fish's office and ask, should we do this as a 1 or a 2-term project? How much do we integrate students into the research project? Do we train them to become junior researchers in some way? And then who are we engaging in the process? Are neighborhood associations a priority? Are business associations a priority? How does our age-friendly network and our age-friendly advisory council play an important role in the work that we're doing? And finally, what's the final product that we're creating, and how is that useful to the bureaus and offices, elected officials and policymakers in this city? And so we want your input. We're looking forward to engaging with you and trying to create the best possible outcomes from these projects. And I want to leave...
Alan, can I just give you a
Oh,
preview?
yes, absolutely.
The mayor a number of months ago had a group of students come in from a high school. They were doing a project around, designing the city or something. And I think at a minimum, we're going to want to talk to you about a time certain in the future where we could have a council presentation. If the students are going to be working on developing this project, we're going to want to hear them, I think, in this room.
That'll make some excited and some very nervous, but I'm sure that's a possibility. We're actually being asked by the university to winnow down where our deliverables are going to be focused and who our core partners are. And I think we may end up having our core partner be the Age-Friendly Advisory Council, with the deliverables coming to the city specifically to try and inform your work. Thank you for the recommendation, and I'd be very excited to bring the students here. I want to leave with a quote from this publication that Margaret talked about earlier, The Case for Age-Friendly Communities. What we do now to make our communities good places to grow up and grow old will yield returns not only for today's elders, but also tomorrow's. That is all of us. And I think the work underscores the fact that this is for all ages and all abilities, and we very much appreciate the support from the city, from you as council, and from the partners in the community. So we hope we have a little bit of time for either comments or questions.
Questions for this great panel. Thank you very much. Great presentation. So keep it up, because between the comp plan and the rest of the work that you're doing and the infill project, there's a lot that will make a difference in people's lives, and just the way you described at the end there. Get it right the first time, and it lasts for a long time. So thank you. Other questions, comments for this group? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Yes, thank you.
Anyone else that would like to speak about this report?
Two
Come on
people
up.
signed up, Gabriel Vaught and Sean Davis.
And Mr. Walsh, come on up. Oh, thank you. Yep, come on up, please.
I have to wait.
Oh,
No, I'm busy. Go.
Who else, sir? Did you say 3, Carla?
Two, and then Mr. Walsh here. Two others. Gabriel and Sean Davis.
Sean Davis isn't here yet. Oh, all right.
My name is Joe Walsh, and I represent Individuals for Justice. I'm a little dizzy, so that's why the hesitation. One of the things I thought of during the presentation was that because of my dizzy spells, I don't drive anymore. So I ride the TriMet and the Max a lot. And one of the things that you'll notice on TriMet is they do a great job with wheelchairs. The bus drivers are very sensitive. They stop the bus, they lower the bus, they get out, they help. But that's it. When people get on with walkers and they're in their 70s and 80s, the bus driver doesn't even get out of the seat. And I often wondered why. They don't lower the ramp. The person is struggling to get the walker up. Even when you lower the bus, you still have an area of maybe 12 inches because I have my little oxygen that I lift up. So the question is, do they have a policy in TriMet that says, lower the ramp for wheelchairs, but what about the walkers? Now, I'm not interested in the shopping carts that older people bring on, because I think that's not necessary. The walkers are. They are medically necessary. So it seems to me that Elders in Action and AARP, which are very powerful organizations, send a note to TriMet, say, what's your policy on this? And if you don't have a policy on walkers, get one. Because they should lower the ramps, let those people on with their walkers so they don't struggle. And if you watch them, they struggle. And I'm saying to myself, why do we do that? Now, TriMet has not responded to me personally, but I think they would with AARP if they wrote them a note. And I'm a member of AARP. So that's that. The other thing is, I am a true believer that if you want to fight a fire, you ask a fireman. And if you want to know about what older people need, you find people in their 80s, 70s, 60s, say, what is it you need? I like to see older people sitting at this desk. Now, I'm not going to get into the ages of the people that were sitting here, but they really look good if they're 80. And I suspect that AARP, and I've been a member since I was 50, or 55, I think it was when I joined. Go older. Because 70 is totally, I rode my bike when I was 60. So I'm going to be 74. It's very, very different in the 70s. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Walsh, which bus lines do you generally ride?
Pardon?
What number buses do you usually ride?
I ride the 4 bus and the 14. If the 4 bus is very crowded, then I switch off to the 14. So those are the 2 main buses. But I notice that when I go to meetings and I ride the 70 bus, 72 bus, other buses, it's the same thing. The bus drivers are very sensitive to wheelchairs, and I praise them for that. But for whatever reason, they don't ignore the walkers, but they don't have the same response. And I know you ride TriMet, and you can watch them.
Well, no, that's my point. On the buses, the lines that I ride, they tend to put the ramp down for the walkers. They don't get up to help the way they might with a wheelchair. But it's interesting. We'll find out the policy. I was just wondering,
Yeah,
because
I
there's
would
different
just be
cultures on
interested
different
in
rides,
policy.
on different lines. Thank you.
Sure.
Welcome. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Gabriel Vaught. I'm speaking here not only on behalf of myself, but also on behalf of Sean Davis. I just had a couple of quick questions or comments based off of the Elders in Action Advocacy Group presentation here. The first that I was thinking about was a comment that was made regarding the elders being priced out of their homes, no-cause evictions, that sort of thing. And I just really want to hope that these sorts of evictions and actions are something that are being undertaken or at least considered by city council, if not currently in the recent past. I don't know of any specific actions currently that are happening in this regard. The second, I actually have a question. Is there an incentive plan for developers to create age-friendly housing within the city? As I see that our city is, an age-friendly city. So I'm just kind of curious about that.
Good questions, both. When it comes to policy, Commissioner Saltzman has led the council in enacting some policy for protections of renters, longer notice periods. And then, good question about whether we have employed incentives so far. We're actually talking about our incentives right now, so your timing is good.
Well, we have many incentives or requirements, actually, that affordable units be suitable for people with disabilities, or can be retrofitted at some point in the future to be suitable for people with disabilities.
Okay, thank you, sir. You may or may not know, are these well-known to the aged community?
To some people that develop that market of housing, yes, for some, but it sounds like we could do
I think
more.
one of the things you're probably getting at, sir, is that there are some threshold levels of accessibility that ought to be embedded in our building code regardless of who is served in the housing. I think that's where you're getting, and I think there's agreement up here that our code should reflect a minimum level of accessibility. And that's something that perhaps our friends through Age Friendly can help us with.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Anyone else want to speak on this item?
Mayor, I move to accept the report.
Then let's take a vote, please, to accept the report.
Fritz?
Thank you very much for the report and for all of your work on behalf of all of us. Most of us have the goal of becoming older on a daily basis. So I actually learned several things today, the most interesting to me being the reason for the change from elder-friendly to age-friendly. And I have been using the words age-friendly for some time and hadn't really understood the significance of that. So thank you for your work on behalf of everybody, and I appreciate Commissioner Fish for your ongoing advocacy on behalf of Elders in Action and our age-friendly community, and this report as well. Aye.
Fish?
Thank you for an excellent report, and thank you for the work that you do in our community. We're going to be more effective when we all link arms. You mentioned in your presentation the work the Attorney General is doing combating elder fraud. We know that the county is involved in, has a range of services they provide to older adults. We've got a housing piece. We can go on and on and on, but we want this to be a city that is welcoming to people of all ages. That means we want children to go play at playgrounds that are universally accessible, and we want older adults to be able to age with dignity in homes they can afford that are accessible. And I am so proud of the work you're doing and grateful for the service you're giving to our city. Thank you. Aye.
Saltzman?
Thank you for the report, and keep up the good work. Aye.
Novick?
Thank you for the report. Thank you for your work. And I want to extend my thanks to ARP and Elders in Action in particular for their engagement on transportation issues in the past year plus. Aye.
Niels?
Well, we have lots of mentors in how to grow older well, and we appreciate the good counsel and advice of Elders in Action, AARP. One of my personal role models is Bud Clark, with whom I get to go on a 30-mile bike ride every year. So I'm impressed by that. And I think the greatest sage on this subject, I'll take a role from Commissioner Novick, who's usually quoting music lyrics. Jimmy Buffett said, "I'm growing older, but not up. My metabolic rate is pleasantly stuck. So let the winds blow over, winds of change blow over my head. I'd rather die while I'm living than live while I'm dead." So I think that spirit of how to grow older gracefully should be with all of us, and with your good advice, more people in Portland will manage that. Thank you. Aye. Thanks very much. Good work. Okay. All right, let's move on to our third item this afternoon, which is 160.
160, direct the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability to develop code language for council consideration to require deconstruction for the city's oldest and most historic houses and duplexes.
Welcome this panel to begin this discussion this afternoon. Just a couple of comments. We have a lot of work to do in this city to preserve the great old buildings that we have. There's been too much demolition and demolition done too carelessly. There's some pretty salient concerns in our community right now about health, and that's one reason why we need to do this more carefully. To remove asbestos and other hazardous materials when houses are demolished more carefully than we have in the past. I think if we pay any attention to what's going on in our city right now, we realize that issues like elevated levels of cadmium or asbestos or arsenic are serious threats to the public health. Secondly, job creation is something that even in a good economy we ought to keep thinking about, and deconstruction of homes creates more jobs than tearing them down with a track hoe. There's also opportunity here to prioritize opportunities for folks that haven't necessarily had opportunities in the construction industry before. Reducing waste and meeting our carbon goals are something this whole council's committed to and that this Bureau is committed to, and this is one more way to do that because homes sent to the landfill is a huge loss in terms of material and a huge load on the environment. So I appreciate the thought behind this work and the folks in the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability who've brought us this proposal this afternoon. And with that, I'll hand it over to Susan and her team to take it away from there.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. Susan Anderson, Director of the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. And with me here today are Elisa Kane and Sean Wood. And we're here to talk about deconstruction as an alternative to traditional demolition. So we all know Portland has been recognized as a sustainability leader for years. We've shown our leadership on everything from recycling to stormwater management to green building. We recycle about 70% of our trash. We have 350 LEED certified buildings. And since 1990, we've cut our carbon emissions 35% per person. But in the midst of all this, there's still a lot of work to be done. And so one area in particular that we want to talk about today is construction waste and demolition. Currently, about 20% of the garbage, the stuff that still goes to the landfill, is construction waste and demolition waste. And while we build very efficient buildings and more sustainable buildings all the time in Portland, the standard practice when we tear them down is to just demolish them, sending most of the waste to the landfill. Deconstruction helps to salvage quality materials for reuse. The benefits are twofold. First, we keep materials out of the landfill, and second, we also avoid the energy and the energy waste and other waste from creating new materials to put into our homes. So one reason we're focusing on deconstruction now, as you know, as you asked us to come back with this report, is the uptick in demos throughout the city. We all know that demos are happening in the city. And some of those are happening because structures are old and they're dilapidated, but many others are also happening because of market demand. Now, we may not want those homes to be torn down and demolished, but if they are, we want to make sure that we do it right and that whatever we can do to reduce waste, to salvage great materials, and to improve and protect human health are things that we want to put into code. So what we're proposing today is a first step. It's a resolution, and then we will come back with an ordinance by May, so we're moving quickly on this. The resolution has been vetted through a couple dozen meetings at least, and has the support of both the Landmarks Commission and the Planning and Sustainability Commission. So I'll pass this on to Elisa and Sean, and we'll go through the specifics of the resolution.
Thank you.
Great. Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm Elisa Kane, the Green Building Manager with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. And this is such an exciting day for us because with your approval of this resolution, we will be the first city in the nation to address some of the impacts of demolition in a way that actually benefits our whole community. So when we talk about demolition, I think we've all been by a site like this, whether on your way to work or in your own neighborhood. It's quite jarring to see a home that maybe had residents in it a month ago come down. And often through traditional demolition, it'll come down in about a day's time. It's usually a backhoe on site and a couple of dumpsters, and it's gone. The materials have no chance to be reused, and most of them end up actually in the landfill. So there's no actual benefit to anything that comes out of that house. And those are houses are made up of our old forests, and they're made up of our old craftspeople who poured over those sites 100 years ago and really was an important part of our development as Portland. And we're not here today to argue about if a building should come down, but if it should have to come down, we think there's a better way, and that is through deconstruction. And deconstruction is a more systematic disassembly of a structure with the intent to maximize the salvage of those materials. And it can be done by hand. It can also include some mechanic equipment. It can often take a couple of weeks, whereas a demolition could happen in a day, but we're talking about 1 to 2 weeks at times. So there are additional considerations around time and labor costs for deconstruction. But we also think there's a lot of benefits to be had there. When we talk about demolition, and I've even seen it at council here, there's a universe of concerns that come up around waste is one, we've already established that. Hazardous materials, very importantly, the loss of historic resources. We've had conversations around affordability as it relates to demolitions, compatibility, and then who gets to know what's going to happen. I've had residents call me and say, there was a house next door to me yesterday, and I came home from work and it's gone. And I think that really can be quite disruptive to communities. And some of these issues are being addressed in other avenues. Deconstruction doesn't necessarily mitigate for all of these things, but it does for some. Particularly compatibility issues are being addressed in the residential infill project. We're going to be looking at compatibility and affordability issues there. We've had conversations at council about the delay in notification. But deconstruction starts to mitigate around the things around waste and resulting carbon emissions, hazardous materials, importantly, and the preservation. And it has one additional benefit, and the mayor touched on this, about job training. So I'll run through the benefits just very briefly here. One of the biggest ones around waste is the carbon benefit. By those materials not going to the landfill, we're talking about 20 metric tons of CO2 saved per house. And if you're talking about 350 homes every year, every house that's saved is 4 cars off the road. In deconstruction, we're looking at a low reuse rate of 50% all the way up to 98% of a house. A lot of it depends on what's in it, the condition it was in when it turns over. In terms of hazardous materials, there's a lot of benefits there around deconstruction. It produces significantly less dust. And because deconstruction is a more deliberate process and there are people on the site, you discover unabated materials like asbestos. So if you pull out an old cabinet set, oftentimes the flooring underneath had asbestos. During the initial walkthrough with the abatement company, they couldn't see through those walls and they find it. Work stops at that point, abatement companies are called, it's handled properly, it's disposed of properly, it doesn't get pulverized and emitted as dust into the neighbor's yard and others. I also want to point out that dust doesn't just affect the person right next door, it affects the people who work on the site, so the demolition contractors, it affects the people who are sorting, and it affects up to many hundreds of feet away. So it's not just a contained site. So one of the questions around affordability often comes up around deconstruction. As I've mentioned, deconstruction can cost more. There are labor costs associated. It doesn't always cost more. The affordability of the homes being demolished. So we took an average of the sale price of all the homes that have been demolished in the last couple of years, and the sales price for that was $175,000. And then we found, average replacement costs, not specifically on that site, but just the average market values. You can see there's a pretty big chasm between the home that gets lost and the homes that get replaced. And I'm not going to say that every house deserves to have another 100 years with us. There are some homes that need to come down because of condition or because we're trying to meet our density goals. But the salvage benefits start to take an impact on affordability. Affordable materials come out of these things, so people who are either renting or want to fix their homes up can have access to affordable materials. It also has fed into a lot of temporary housing opportunities, such as Dignity Village. And in some areas, and specifically you'll hear from Habitat for Humanity, actually the deconstruction of homes leads to affordable homes because it's helping support their affordable housing efforts. And lastly, one of the questions we've gotten about is, if this resolution passes, is there an industry out there that can support this? The industry already exists. You'll hear from a lot of those folks today. There's people who are doing the training today. You will also have someone from Oregon Tradeswomen that has a program right now that is training people who are pre-apprentice with a good career pathway into the construction industry. They're being trained on deconstruction right now. those programs will need to be expanded, and I think it will, again, provide excellent opportunities for people of color, women, and other historically underrepresented groups in construction. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sean to talk about the process about how we got here. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Sean Wood. So I just want to give a little bit of background, and we've been here a couple of times, so some of this may sound familiar, but back in February of 2015, at the conclusion of a hearing on demolition delay and notification, the mayor asked BPS to develop an advisory group on deconstruction so we could look at ways of advancing deconstruction as an alternative to demolition in the city of Portland. We established that advisory group back in April and have met a total of 14 times since we first started meeting. That group is a really robust cross-section, I think, of stakeholders in all of this. So we have the development community, the neighborhoods, and the salvage industry all present at those meetings. And one of the first things we came up with, and this was back in June, is we approached council with a recommendation to start off with a phased approach for deconstruction. And as a first phase, we would look at a grant program, so a voluntary incentive-based first step. We kicked that program off in September. Meanwhile, the advisory group kept meeting, knowing that we wanted to come back in January of 2016 with additional recommendations on those next steps. We're pretty close to January. It's February now, so I apologize for not quite meeting that deadline. But what we did is developed recommendations for that next step, which is why we're here today. And it is a resolution that would direct the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability to create code language that requires projects seeking a demolition permit for a 1 or 2 family structure, so that's a house or a duplex, to fully deconstruct that structure if the house was built in 1916 or earlier or is a designated historic resource. And by historic resource, I mean landmarks, contributing structures in conservation and historic districts, as well as projects that are listed on the historic resource inventory. One of the things we learned from our advisory group is not all houses are suitable for deconstruction. So in developing code language, we'd make sure that there are exemptions for hazardous structures that potentially pose an immediate public hazard or are unsuitable for deconstruction due to rot or fire or mold. And you're probably wondering why 1916? It seems like a relatively arbitrary date. And what I'm going to try to do here with the next series of slides is distill 9 months worth of advisory group meetings down to 60 seconds. So here it goes. When we look at the universe of buildings, we've got single family structures, multifamily structures, and commercial structures. All of these buildings have great materials in them, some more than others. We know from our advisory group that any kind of requirement we want to keep simple. We don't want to flood the market with too many materials because the value of those materials offsets the costs of deconstruction. We want to make sure there's sufficient labor in place to actually accomplish this additional work. And we want to make sure it's done in a safe and effective manner and that these requirements are successful. So that requires a measured approach. So I'm going to narrow this down to 1916. Commercial buildings, there's a lot of great material in these. However, they're not very homogeneous in terms of how they were constructed. So brick, masonry, concrete, steel, wood, all different types of framing. They're all different types of sizes. So let's eliminate those. Multifamily, similar challenges with commercial structures, various materials, different sizes. There's also only a handful of these taken down in any given year. So that leads us to houses and duplexes. There are about 300 demolitions a year when it comes to single-family structures. While it would be great to deconstruct all of those, getting back to kind of our guarded approach coming out of the advisory group, we need to narrow this down. So if we've got a universe of homes, let's split those into thirds, kind of pre-war, post-war, and then houses that are over 100 years old. 1965 to present, that's when adhesives were introduced, so it makes the buildings harder to deconstruct, and also the material quality starts to go down. Similarly, post-war, no adhesives, but material, second growth lumber, hollow core doors, those are the types of things we see in those houses. So not as good a candidate for a first step. When we look at pre-war, this is the cream of the crop. These are the best materials. We're talking old growth lumber, hardwood floors, solid core doors. If we were to draw the line just in material value, this is where we'd end up. But that's 66% or 2/3 of all the house demolitions. That's too big of a first step to take. So we started looking at, well, what are our oldest and most historic homes? Those are the ones that are over 100 years old, and they represent 1/3 of all the demolitions. So roughly 100 a year. Historic, we want to put that in there for obvious reasons. Anything that the city has, or the nation, in fact, has designated as a historic resource, if that building has to come down, we want to see it deconstructed and those materials live on. So that's how we ended up with 1916 or older. And this is a more finer grain breakdown of the age of structure and the number of demolitions. So you can see the proposed kind of first phase would be 33% of all demolitions, which is that 100 years old or older. Historic demolitions represent less than 1%, so it's not a huge number. Moving in 1917 to 1930, that number goes up to 27%. That would be a big step and something we could consider in later phases. There are geographic components to this. If we're talking about pre-1917 homes, we're talking about streetcar era homes, areas close in, north, northeast, and southeast. When Sellwood along Foster, even some in St. John's. We don't see a whole lot of 100-year-old or older homes east of 82nd Avenue or even in large parts of Southwest. If the resolution were passed today, looking at next steps, as Susan mentioned, we would work with both our advisory group and the Bureau of Development Services and the city attorney to craft code language that would work towards meeting this resolution. The code requirements would go into effect in late October of 2016. And as a way to check in and make sure we got that right, we would come back to council a year after the effective date of the requirements and just check in and see how things are going and report on the status of the program. And then finally come back to council 2 years after the effective date and look at raising that bar. So bringing in additional houses up to the 1930s, or starting to look at major renovations or commercial structures or multifamily structures. So that concludes staff's presentation. I wanted to end on this particular slide. This is a building on Northwest Marshall back in 1943. This structure came down. So demolitions isn't a new thing, and nor is deconstruction in our city. And I like to think of this slide as what's old is new again in terms of both the salvage of these materials living on, and then also deconstruction as an industry. It was something that we used to do as a city. We've sort of lost touch with that, and now we see that resurrection. So thank you, and we're happy to answer any questions you might have.
A couple. I'd like you to just give us if you could address for a moment the question of the capacity of the market to meet the demand that we will likely be creating by passing this. And so one of the things that I imagine will happen is we'll be creating lots of new businesses by creating this incentive. But in the short term, how would you assess our capacity, both in terms of the firms that do the work and the facilities that receive the materials?
So, a big part of our advisory group was taking a first step that was manageable. So we knew we didn't want to take such a large first step that we end up flooding the industry with extra work and extra materials. There's currently a large demand for the actual materials, so I think that's less of a concern than the boots on the ground that would be responsible for deconstructing these buildings. All of the major deconstruction firms in the area have been part of our advisory group, and they feel strongly that they can, with training, which we'll hear a little bit about here later, is a critical component to meeting that additional demand. So between now and that effective date of late October, we'll be working with a bunch of different industry partners to establish training to meet that demand.
Okay, and the other just question I had has to do with the public health dimension of this. I know the mayor and his team has been very focused on the environmental impacts and how we might, through this effort, limit asbestos and other airborne pollutants. We've had we're having an interesting conversation about this question over the past couple of weeks and whether we have adequate federal and state laws and oversight. As part of this effort, do you contemplate looking at whether there are some local regulations we can adopt, so in addition to the deconstruction, we can fill some gaps in the regulatory patchwork to make sure that asbestos abatement is done and is done professionally?
Sure. The Department of Environmental Quality is currently in their rulemaking process for final rules on requiring asbestos surveys for any demolition, house demolition. I know that BDS had asked them, the Bureau of Development Services, to consider as a requirement submitting that asbestos survey at time of demolition permit. I don't know if DEQ is going to take them up on that suggestion, but that would certainly help fill the gap. If BDS is the entity that is taking in the permits, DEQ can only request that survey if there's a complaint. So
Could I just make a suggestion? We keep learning, to our great frustration, that there are either holes in the regulatory system that's set up over here that we rely on, or anytime we have a good idea, it gets preempted. And so maybe there is a third option here, which is at some point just to regulate. And if someone thinks we're out of line, let them take us to court, and we can defend what we're trying to do in terms of public health. But I think between those two, I think there's a growing frustration with the idea that that somehow this responsibility has been delegated over here, and there seem to be some holes, and then whenever we try to act, we're told we're preempted. It might be at some point an area where you give us a risk assessment and the council says, let's go. And if it turns out we've overreached, fine. But in the interim, we've actually stood up for people's health rights in the interim.
I do believe years ago, Margaret Mahoney, when she headed up the combined planning and Bureau of Development Services, we looked at were there options for local codes related to health, energy efficiency, and ADA requirements that we could do in addition to. And we found very limited, but it was exactly what you were saying. We could have done it and then had someone push back and decide whether or not we really could, whether it was interpretation, which is allowable, versus local code.
Susan, you love to push the envelope. We're going to get sued no matter what we do, and we're likely to be preempted no matter what we do. So I think it ought to just be part of the conversation. What kind of local steps could we take, and then see if we can defend our actions?
Other questions for the
But first, Mayor, I want to compliment you and the Bureau for this very elegant way of addressing the demolition challenge coming back after the demolition tax proposal. I think this is a much more nuanced and careful and has had a lot of community input in it. So I want to thank everybody for your participation in this and your leadership in particular. Part of the impetus for it, though, is that we want to discourage demolishing of good old houses. So I'm not necessarily persuaded that we shouldn't do the 1917 to 1930 range if we want And I've been taught by my colleague Commissioner Novick about how supply and demand should fit the market with Uber, and so maybe we should just open up a lot more homes that would be available for demolition or deconstruction. When you think about, I appreciate the explanation of why not multifamily and also why starting with 1916. I also remember Commissioner Novick admonishing parks to consider the heritageness of trees earlier so that they could enjoy their heritageness for longer. And the question when I first started, it was 1916, I was like, well, we're going to keep moving that goalpost. I think there is a case to be made for 1930 as the beginning of the Great Recession, or the middle of the Great Recession. Presumably, homes at that point started getting made with less quality materials. I think even though that's now 60%, that's not necessarily a bad thing. If we are much more careful and thoughtful about demolishing 60% of our homes, that would also accomplish the goals. So I'd like us to hear testimony and consider that. At the very least, I would suggest an amendment that not just the structure is a designated historic resource, but also requiring deconstruction in historic conservation districts, certainly for contributing structures as well as designated structures. So those are things that I'd like to hear some testimony about and for us to consider.
And maybe a reaction about, is it administratively feasible to take that next tier of houses into the program, in your opinion?
We can tell you our opinion, which is basically formed from what we heard from the industry, which is, hold on, it's a fire hose. If you shoot it all at us at once, we may fail, and we don't want to fail. And so I'd like, as people come up to testify, for you to ask them a little bit, some of that, so that you can
They
get
just say,
that
no, I
here.
can't do that. This, just like any other company, if you've got to, they would say, I have a 6-month waiting list. Well, fair enough. And then there would be other companies who say, look, there's a niche here, we're going to come on board. We shouldn't be crafting our permits for deconstruction companies based on the number that we have now.
The only experience I have that's familiar to this is when we suddenly made more energy efficiency requirements. They did the exact same thing, and they rolled it in over a 2-year period, which is more what we're talking about, because the industry needed to get there, and you would have had really shoddy work, and we don't want to have poor work done. So I agree with you. We need to get there. I'm just not sure we need to do it tomorrow. We may want to roll it in over 2 years or
Well,
something.
as I say, I want to listen to testimony about that. I just wanted everybody to know that that's concerns I have.
Yeah, okay, good.
Commissioner, on the Uber analogy, I would note that we didn't pass any legislation requiring a certain percentage of the population to take taxis everywhere. And I would have been hesitant to do that without making absolutely sure that there was an adequate supply of private for hire service.
Duly noted.
Other questions for the Bureau or other reactions from you? Okay, we'll probably be calling on you again. I know we have some invited testimony in 2 panels here, and then we have public testimony after that. So let me thank this group and call Stephen Reichert, Joe Connell, and Travis Phillips as our first panel. Good afternoon and welcome.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Stephen Reichert, and I serve as the Executive Director of the Rebuilding Center. The Rebuilding Center deconstructs homes and occasionally commercial structures, salvaging up to 85% of the materials for resale in our warehouse on North Mississippi Avenue. We estimate that 8 tons of materials come into and leave the store on a daily basis. Each year, we sell over $1.5 million of salvage goods, priced at 10 to 60% of the retail cost, saving over 60,000 customers over $2 million off of retail on an annual basis, reducing the cost of their projects, while recycling roughly 3,000 tons of materials annually. We provide employment to 30 individuals, roughly 50% of whom are people of color. Several are ex-felons. We offer a minimum starting salary of $12.50 an hour with full health benefits and 3 to 4 weeks paid vacation, depending on the length of tenure. And our profits, such as they are reinvested into the community through our community outreach program. And we also donate tens of thousands of dollars of materials to various organizations around town annually, including many that address the issue of homelessness, such as Dignity Village, Right to Dream 2, and Hazelnut Grove. I serve on the Deconstruction Advisory Group to the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, and in that capacity, I've attempted to offer to the advisory group the knowledge that the Rebuilding Center has as an organization with more than 15 years of experience in the deconstruction industry. The Rebuilding Center offers its strong support for the resolution that is before council today. By our estimate, roughly 30 homes were deconstructed in the Portland area in 2015, of which the Rebuilding Center deconstructed 15. Although the resolution, which we believe may triple or even quadruple the number of homes to be constructed, is ambitious, we believe it is very doable. There are 3 scaling issues that arise with respect to this proposal. The first is scaling the workforce so that we can deconstruct the homes in need of demolition within the timeframes that are acceptable to the deconstruction industry. Secondly, scaling our ability to move the additional product that will materialize as a result of the increase in the number of deconstructed homes. And thirdly, scaling market demand for that additional product. We have begun to address all 3 issues. We believe it will require some 25 to 40 new deconstructionists to perform the additional work. And it is admittedly difficult to hire skilled tradespeople in the current building boom. That said, we have already begun working with partners around the community, partners such as Constructing Hope, Oregon Tradeswomen, Portland Opportunities Industrialization Center, and the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, amongst others, to design a training program that will allow us to ramp up in a timely manner to meet the increased demand for services. Increased deconstruction and associated jobs will provide a valuable workforce development opportunity. These jobs can pay well with good benefits. It is our intention at the Rebuilding Center to seize this opportunity to also advance an equity agenda, focusing our hiring on people of color, women, ex-felons, veterans, etc. With regards to the 2 additional scaling issues, being able to move product and scaling demand, we have examined our market and we know that we sell 40% of all of our product in the 5 contiguous zip codes around the Rebuilding Center. We are the largest single merchandiser of salvage products in the Portland area, but our zip code analysis indicates that there is substantial room for growth in the marketplace. To address the challenge of distributing the additional materials, we have begun a close partnership with Habitat for Humanity's Restores. In addition to the 3 local restores, there are 9 other stores between Eugene and Longview. Joe Connell, am I right here, the manager of the local stores, has been pestering me for some time now to provide him with salvage wood for a sale in his store. We tested his promise in January. Joe took 2 loads of wood off of us, and he rapidly sold those in his restores. So we believe that the market will easily absorb the additional materials that will materialize as a result of the adoption of this resolution. Finally, on the matter of asbestos that has risen before the council today, I'd like to share with the council the results of a study that we conducted last fall on behalf of the Office of Planning and Sustainability regarding asbestos. Prior to conducting a whole house deconstruction, we hire or ask the client to hire a firm to assess the home for asbestos and, if asbestos is found, to abate the home. Thus, prior to beginning any deconstruction, the homes that we deconstruct have been certified asbestos-free. We looked at the 51 whole house deconstructions that we performed in 2013 through 2015. And of those 51 homes that had been declared asbestos-free before we began work, we found asbestos in 26 of those homes. The only conclusion I can draw from this study is that deconstruction offers the only foolproof method of eliminating the risk of asbestos exposure. Thank you. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Good afternoon. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. My name is Joe Connell. I'm the Vice President of Retail Operations for the Portland Habitat for Humanity. Before I read my statement, you sparked a thought earlier with your story about Rome. And I was looking at the recent National Geographic, and on the cover was a picture of London and the demo work they're doing, or the digging they're doing there, and the 1,000 years of stuff they're uncovering. So it came to mind when you were speaking about reading about that and how they would tear apart and reuse, and build layer upon layer upon layer to make that city what it is. So it echoes kind of what you were saying earlier. Yeah. And my other thought there was I'm from rural Maine, and we didn't throw things away. We would tear things apart and reuse them as part of our culture. The nearest Home Depot was an hour and 40 minutes away. So it wasn't quick on our list to get to. So things went to the dump, and yes, Bryce, it was called a dump. It was not a transfer station because everything just got dumped there. But the advantage to it was that we could glean stuff from it. I was often there on a Saturday afternoon pulling stuff back out of there. So very little went to waste compared to what our modern urban culture is used to. So that's part of my motivation in the work I do and part of why I'm here. So I'll read now, sorry. As you know, Habitat for Humanity builds affordable homes with community support. And one of our ways of supporting this work is through our restores. All funds from the sale of materials in our stores help to build affordable homes. Our work is supported by the community in many ways, and the one way in which we see the most growth potential at this point is in increasing our materials donation base and growing our stores. Our present 3 stores are salvaging about 13 million pounds of material annually, but we believe there is the potential for far more. We are now planning to open 3 more stores and expand our deconstruction operations to build our capacity to double that amount in the next several years. This would more than double our fundraising for affordable housing as well and enable Portland Habitat and our neighbors to build an additional 14 homes per year. In looking to build our deconstruction program, we have already started partnering with the Rebuilding Center to start priming our customers for salvage lumber. We're also talking to deconstruction contractors about setting up partnerships that would allow us to do a hybrid type decon where they would take the building down and our volunteers and staff could capture the salvage materials. This model has been successfully utilized in other markets such as Raleigh, North Carolina, and allows for the capture of materials through decon with quicker timing and lower cost. Several of us are traveling next month to Raleigh for the National Deconstruction Conference to learn more from others around the nation and Raleigh in particular. In conclusion, we support the recommendation before the council, understanding that this is a bold and balanced step for the city, the salvage industry, developers, and demolition contractors. We also understand that as the market adjusts, so too should the city's requirements, with the ultimate goal of deconstructions far outnumbering demolitions. Thank you again for this opportunity and for your leadership.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. My name is Travis Phillips. I am the Manager of Housing and Development for Portland Community Reinvestment Initiatives, or PCRI. I think several of you already know we own over 800 units of single and multifamily affordable housing here in the city of Portland, located in over 30 neighborhoods. We believe that everyone should be able to afford a safe, stable, and healthy home. We develop affordable housing for families to rent and for first-time home buyers. We were created by the community over 20 years ago. And because of all this, it's very important that we are sensitive to and responsive to the needs and desires of the neighbors where we own and where we develop these homes. Deconstruction, as one of those sensitivities, is well aligned with our goals to be good neighbors and good stewards of the environment. We save homes where it makes sense, but we can improve density and opportunity and affordability in cases where it doesn't make sense to save homes. We also know that low-income families are disproportionately impacted by the disparate health impacts and negative environmental conditions, so we're especially sensitive to health when we develop homes and in cases where we replace a home that was already existing. That sensitivity includes the health of the people and the health of the environment. So, to kind of hit on a couple of the issues that I think are critical when it comes to deconstruction, to provide affordable homes, cost obviously is a concern. To achieve affordability, we have to keep our costs in check. Deconstruction costs, and deconstruction is a method that we've used on several projects over the course of probably at least and maybe more than 10 years. We see that deconstruction costs vary from project to project depending on the site conditions, the value of the material. In the best case scenario, including a most recent development where we've got some new homes that are actually under construction now, deconstruction was cost neutral to the project, and it only added a very small amount of time to the overall project timeline. We've seen some other scenarios where there might be a $2,000 or $5,000 cost differential for deconstruction versus demolition. But I think one of the real benefits is, by its nature, deconstruction is more controlled. It minimizes dust and debris compared to machine demolition. We've certainly talked about the difference as it has to do with abating and controlling asbestos. And it also includes, although to a different degree, lead, which currently I think is one of perhaps not as easy to deal with because you can't remove lead from a property in the same way that you can remove asbestos. But by deconstruction, it as a manual process, ensures that we minimize the amount of lead dust that's put into the environment, and it allows us to control what and where lead-contaminated materials go when we have to dispose of those.
Can I just stop you there for one sec? Because every time we mention lead, people start having visions of Flint, Michigan,
Yes.
and then they go out and buy bottled water. So just a quick, just to make sure that we have no lead in our water system. And we don't even have lead in the connectors from the main pipes to the homes. If there is lead in anyone's water, it may be because of household plumbing. And the homes that are particularly suspect were infill homes between 1970 and 1985. And apparently the reason is that there was, from time to time, people then used lead in the soldering. And that's one of the reasons why the Water Bureau, at no cost to our customers, offers a free lead testing kit. And I'm testing my water next Tuesday, Mayor, and on camera. And I'm going to ask my colleagues to do it too. But we do not have lead in our water. We do not have lead in our water distribution system. But it is possible that lead was used in the soldering of houses of a certain vintage. And that's why we encourage people to test. And if you're not sure and you're worried, you have two other options, which you can buy a filter. Or actually, the two options are a filter to be absolutely safe, or do a test. But the test is very easy. Even I can do it. So if people are concerned and have homes between 70 and 85, they can go to the Water Bureau website, get a free kit, and then we'll test it for you and let you know if there's a problem. But thank you.
Thank you for that public service announcement.
Thank you. So I mentioned that as it had to do with lead, the manual process of deconstruction really helps minimize any lead dust that workers are exposed to, that any neighbors are exposed to, or that perhaps ends up at a site. I think that's, very important to be mindful of our health. Being a manual process, deconstruction, as we've talked about a little bit here too, though, equals more labor and more opportunity for living wage jobs. And as a provider of affordable housing, and knowing that the amount of housing that is affordable to many working families in Portland right now isn't keeping up with the need, the opportunity to provide jobs is very important to help us bridge that gap and to ensure that folks are self-sufficient, which is certainly an end goal that I think we all have. I do just want to bring up very briefly a couple of considerations and perhaps challenges that I've seen and I'm sort of aware of with the potential for deconstruction. I think that the folks from BPS touched on this a little bit, but there are relatively few contractors and a smallish workforce at this stage that perform and specialize in deconstruction. So I do think we should be very mindful of a widespread rollout to ensure that we can do a good job with it, to ensure that we can ramp up the workforce. And I would say I tend to agree with the idea of, in fact, that ramp up so that organizations like Habitat for Humanity and the Rebuilding Center can train those workers and ensure that we do good quality deconstruction and don't have folks who are put in a situation to not do things the way that we want them to. So I think taking some time to be mindful and make sure that we do a good job of bridging that skills gap and bringing folks up to speed and ensuring that there is the capacity to continue to do good work with this is great. And then I think just the only other note that I would make is that because many of the homes built at the point in time that we're talking about have at some point in time or have the possibility of lead paint and other lead materials and lead hazards, There are some limits to utilize existing training programs where folks in the training program perhaps don't have lead certification, and to increase that workforce. So that needs to be considered, and there definitely needs to be a mindfulness of expanding and adapting the programs to address that consideration as well, so that folks do know how to handle things properly, so that folks are safe, so the workers aren't exposed to things that we don't want them to be to, and they have the appropriate skills to do that. But that all said, I am in support of it. We have used deconstruction many times. It's been a fantastic opportunity to really gain some support of neighborhood where removing an existing home makes sense. And certainly the neighbors that we've worked with have been much friendlier, having gone through the deconstruction process versus machine demolition. So I do support moving forward.
Thank you. Other questions for this panel? Thank you all very much. Thank you. I have another panel to call, and then we'll go to public testimony. That is Stacy Edwards, Amy James Neal, Mary Helen Kincaid, and Barbara Kerr. I think we'll need to pull up one more chair to get all four of you here if you're all four here, but just grab a chair as you come up and make it work. Nope, Susan's got one for you. Okay. Good afternoon. Oh, maybe we're missing. Oh, Stacy's not here. Okay, false alarm about the chairs. Sorry about that. Welcome. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Amy James Neal, and I'm the construction manager and job developer at Oregon Tradeswomen. Oregon Tradeswomen is a state-certified pre-apprenticeship training program that prepares low-income women for careers in the construction trades. And these are high-wage jobs that we're preparing these women for. So as a way to get our students hands-on construction experience, we partner with nonprofits that need construction work done, and we perform that work for free. So for the last 6 months, we've been working out at the Living Cully project. This building operated as a strip club for more than a decade until it was purchased by the Living Cully partners. And we have been performing the deconstruction on that building, the interior deconstruction. So it is a method to get this building more attractive to potential tenants to take over the building and be an asset to the community. We've been doing all of the deconstruction on the interior of the building. So with some really intensive safety training and some keen oversight, our students have done all of the work so far, which includes tearing out all of the interior walls, some of which were load-bearing, some of which were just partition walls. We've removed posts and beams, doors, metal-clad, fire break panels, cabinetry, appliances, all of the fixtures, carpeting, subfloor, all of the materials that were salvageable within the building. And although in our program, it's just a 7-week program, and our students only have 5 days of hands-on experience, all of this work was performed by these students, and it was entirely by the students. My students that come into my program have very little to no experience working on a crew with power tools or in the construction industry at all. And again, all of this happened over the course of 5 days on the project. So by the end of these 5 days, not only did these women learn the skills that it takes to enter these high-wage apprenticeship jobs, but they also, in doing so, in the training process, we salvaged hundreds of board feet of lumber, and again, all of those materials that would have otherwise been diverted to the landfill. And to be honest, I'm a carpenter of 25 years. I was a little uncertain. This is the first time that I've done a major deconstruction project with a group of students before, and I wasn't sure how it would go, how much they would be able to do as a group of novices. But I was really surprised that with very little training, just some intensive training and some really good oversight, that they were willing to do all of that work, and they were able to do all of the work. And what I also learned is that if we are determined to make deconstruction a part of Portland's values, there are people that are willing and able to do this work. And as a side note, students that participated in this project, doing the deconstruction on this project, many of them are now pursuing deconstruction as a career. So if they're exposed to the opportunities and there are jobs at the end of my training and they know about these jobs, they want this work. It's really good entry-level work into high-wage construction careers. So, and additionally, as an educator, as their teacher,
And as somebody who's been in the construction industry for a really long time, I'm the one who's tasked with teaching these people. And this is the future of the construction industry. This is the face of the future of the construction industry. And I don't want to be the one to tell them that our industry does not value natural resources or that we don't have a responsibility in reducing waste. I don't want to teach them that the industry standard is to crush a building and put it in a landfill. I don't want to be the one to tell them that. We teach our students at Oregon Trades women in the field. So I'm personally committed as their trainer to doing what it takes, being an integral part of building up the people that are going to be necessary to do this work. I will be part of that training to meet that industry demand. My students want this work. And I invite any of you to come out and check out my students on this project. Come watch them do the work of deconstruction. It's really great work. Thanks for your leadership.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
So do you support the proposal as written?
I do support the proposal. Thank you.
My name is Barbara Kerr. I am the United Neighborhoods for Reform representative on the Deconstruction Advisory Group. And
Just move the microphone over.
There
you go.
Thank you. I wondered what you were doing. And first off, I want to really thank Sean and Alyssa and the BPS for an incredible job on a committee that represented competing interests, but I felt that we were all heard and it was constructive, absolutely constructive. I'm hesitating because I've been hearing so many fantastic things today. There really isn't any reason for me to go over all of the things I wanted to say in terms of the benefits, et cetera, because we've had such incredible testimony. I do want to say, Sean and Alyssa have put in years waiting for this. And next year, it will be 40 years since I co-founded Rejuvenation. And it's been a long time coming, and I'm real excited. Real excited. Okay. So UNR feels that we want to be sure that as we adopt deconstruction as the way Portland removes buildings if they can't be relocated, we want to be sure that that definition is maintained, that it has to do with maximizing reuse. We don't want to see any of the incredible standards that our existing deconstructionists have set be lessened in any way. We don't want there to be greenwashing where people claim that, just because we're deconstructing, that means it's okay to take the building down. If we're sort of saving materials and we are deconstructing, there's a lot of definition and care that will have to go into the codes when they're written. We also want to be sure that it's well defined because deconstruction can be complaint-driven enforcement. Can function with complaint-driven enforcement as opposed to demolitions that go down in a couple of days. And so we want the public to know what deconstruction is and what it's not. We feel that mandatory deconstruction will be successful. There's clearly a reuse market. That's not a biggie. But we also want it to be understood that all houses have potential for salvage or reuse. If typically 85% of the materials that come out can be reused, and even materials that can't be reused for their original use can be repurposed, as we know. But also, and here is our, one of our biggest pushes, is that if the materials can't be reused, they still must be deconstructed to avoid the hazmat exposure, to be controlled in how they're removed. We feel that when the work is there, the existing businesses will expand. As we've heard today, we feel that also that abatement and demo companies will adapt. New businesses will start up. It's just a matter of having the houses, the supply of houses. Not that we are encouraging houses to be taken down. We're not. But if they have to be taken down and they're done by deconstruction, then the business will be there. The businesses will be there. The labor force will be there. It does cost developers a little more money and time sometimes, not, probably more often than not, but that's the cost of replacing with new construction. When they're not deconstructed, the building is being subsidized by the neighbors and the environment. And we just have to be clear about that. Deconstruction is not a detriment to affordable housing. The used building materials will help low-income people be able to repair their houses. In rejuvenation, oftentimes like somebody can come in and they needed to fix their front door lock. And we could give them a mortise lock that would fit back in the hole. It meant that they didn't have to go and spend $150 for a new front door passage and have to hire a carpenter to put it in. Besides the houses that are removed, when houses are removed and demolished, are the affordable ones. The ones that replace them aren't. So we need to be clear about that. And with any change in health and safety regulations, there can be delay, and delay causes developers some money, and that's totally understood. But the delay in controlling the hazardous materials and the delay in reducing our carbon impact outweigh that, and we will adapt. UNR urges that the resolution be amended to speed up the timeline. The materials in houses built in 1916 or before are irreplaceable, high quality, even in the smaller, less substantial homes. The 1920s, however, used the same old-growth lumber and even more built-ins and other features. With the advent of electrical appliances, people stopped employing servants and started building smaller houses. The money was put into the quality materials and features. If you've ever seen what's often called a storybook house built in the 20s, they're gorgeous. And the woodwork, the tile, everything, the features are beautiful in there. So there's a whole lot that we would lose during that time. Besides the fact there are a lot of 20s houses, and there are a lot of neighborhoods that are built of mostly 20s houses. The other thing about 20s houses was that was an era that had reacted to the germ theory, and so things were painted a lot. It was just the fashion. There's a lot of paint. Obviously, there's going to be some lead paint in there, which in terms of reuse is not a problem because it has, 80, 90 years of paint over the top, and can be sealed in with new paint and can safely be removed if done right. However, if they're demolished, then that is pulverized and goes up into the air and becomes a major health issue. With the increasing public concern, we feel that waiting to mandate deconstruction any further is going to be a problem for the developers too, because people are going to start suing. They have started suing. There's a class action suit in Flint. There's one coming up in Southeast Portland. They're going to have to deconstruct just to avoid that liability. And the city will as well. So we totally support this first step. And we're asking that it could be amended to move up the timeline to increase the number of houses and save the resources and the health and safety that are involved in that next era.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Mary Helen, good afternoon.
I think I have that.
Yep, you're on. You're on.
The whole thing slides down.
It works.
Okay. Mary Helen Kincaid, I was a member of the Destruction Advisory Group and sat on that committee as the DRAC chair. There were two other DRAC members, first Kristen Wells, and then she was followed by Phil Damiano, who participated. They both had environmental concerns, and that's why they wanted to participate. I'm not going to reiterate things, but I do want to say that the BPS staff did an excellent job. There was good representation from various businesses that participated in varied ways with deconstruction and demolition. And there were two community representatives, Barbara, and I guess you could call me community, but I was more DRAC. So there was no true neighborhood association recognized organization on the committee, and I'll later kind of address that. BPS staff came to our January DRAC meeting and made a presentation. DRAC neither voted to support or oppose the proposal because they had too many questions. And so I kind of took the notes from that meeting so that I could relay those questions that DRAC had in regards to those. They were concerned of how the age of the house would be determined because not all the time are the records correct when in the records that BDS has. And so there might be some way to fix the system, because if the house is remodeled in 1970 and then it gets completely remodeled, then there's a lot of intricacies there. So that was one concern. Which historic designation would be used, because we all know that the HRI is pretty much useless right now, but the good news is that BPS hired a historic planner and will hopefully be able to move forward on that. And I wasn't going to name names, but I think we all know who this. The increased cost to deconstruction varies widely with who you ask. I heard Travis say that it was cost neutral. I've heard that it's $9,000 to $10,000, and a lot depends on what has to be done. With excavation is a big issue, because when they deconstruct and there's a basement, part of the deconstruction does not include the excavation. So then whoever is doing the building has to then hire someone to do that added excavation. So there was a concern of how that cost would be covered, and most people are pointing, saying, well, the developer or the landowner should pay for that, but that is only going to trickle downhill or uphill to the next buyer for affordable housing. So how that is tackled, I think, needs to be a very important piece of this to make it successful. I've been at a couple neighborhood meetings where there's been some good suggestions about incentives, so that if you, most of your waste is just construction waste, and that you get credit for what you deconstructed and didn't bring to the landfill, and that there are lesser fees for those people that are doing deconstruction, that the costs somehow be shared, that this is and one of the DRAC members brought up, Herman Colas brought this up. He said, why should I support an emerging industry? Why should I pay $9,000 more for an industry that's now emerging? And can we find a way to help with the training, help with the cost, to get those things more in line with what a mechanical demolition would essentially accomplish, but not in a way that some people would like. If someone chooses deconstruction, is there a way to lower fees? Is there a way to offer them an incentive, much like we do when we buy a refrigerator that's energy assistance, you get some sort of thing. And so I think there's those kind of options that have not been put into this. A feasibility study. Everybody says we can handle it, we can do it, but we've not seen cold hard numbers. And so would that happen? That was, there was a concern that there was only 3 full-time deconstruction companies in Portland, and that we would add to that burden. And I've heard today that they say they can take it on. So I don't know who's going to decide that, but that would be a concern. And does less material to the landfill have unintended consequences? Are we going to put somebody out of business because they aren't hauling things to the landfill and we're taking 40% of waste away? What's going to happen to those people that were doing that? I know it's a kind of a social kinds of issue, but will those people transform into another, and can that be part of the issue? And then how would this be administered? Inspection cost, enforcement cost, all of those kinds of things need to be explored before, as Barbara mentioned, the complaint. Everything's complaint driven. So I complain that I didn't like the way they did the deconstruction. What is a deconstruction? So that needs to be clearly defined. So going forward, I think I've been asked the question several times, would DRAC support this proposal? And I think they would, with a lot of additions. And I can't speak because we have such a wide, varied, but those were their concerns with what they heard at the January meeting. I think the number one thing is a clear definition of deconstruction needs to be on the table, that there needs to be more community input. Barbara and I are not representative of the entire city. There was no outreach done to land use groups, neighborhood coalition chairs and directors meetings to get their feedback. I brought it up at a South Tabor Neighborhood Association meeting, and a guy brought up the idea about incentives for dumping costs. I think there needs to be more of that, because I think there's a lot of wisdom in our neighborhoods, and I think we need to involve them more in the conversation, because they're the ones that are being most affected. I also think that there needs to be state regulatory people, because I could go on forever about hazmat, control, asbestos, lead, who enforces, who does what. I really like your idea of the third option, but let's just do it. But as current history, daily today, is going on about state regulation of different things, as well as what I witnessed when when part of the demolition delay ordinance tried to get everybody in the room about lead and asbestos. There were 11 different bureaus and state agencies that came to that meeting that all had different pieces. None of them were talking to each other. They all kind of had some familiarity. So it's a big task, but I think that hearing this today, I think that the city could take a lead and say, we want to fix this. We want to make it be better, and this is how we get those people in the room. We've already met 2 or 3 times. It might be a good opportunity to bring those people back to the table. OSHA and OHA and Multnomah County and the lead line, and I could go on and on. I think there needs to be a clearly defined process for permitting and inspection and enforcement, because otherwise you're just going to have a lot of people saying, and no offense to all the colleagues of people that do this, but a lot of people are going to become deconstructors, and if there's no guidelines, then what happens?
Mary Helen, I just want to stop you there for 1 second. Are some of these questions you're raising the kind of questions that can be addressed through the rulemaking process?
Writing code, yeah.
The code, because I'm trying to figure out where it's.
I think they need to be specifically requested that these questions be answered.
Well, I think they're all, I'm making a list, and they're very thoughtful questions, but they could in fact be addressed, many of these could be addressed through the code, right? The
Right.
definitions,
But I think if we set a timeline of October 2016, I don't think you should set a date. I mean, well, you can't, either way. I think we need to answer these questions before we implement this program.
Well, one of the questions that I would have is does the mayor intend to bring back the proposed code language to council, in which case would we have that?
Of course, yes.
So if
That's the only way to get it to be code.
Sure. No, I understand that.
well,
but-
there's some stuff I think we can delegate, but if the intention is to bring code back, then that would be at least an insurance policy on some of the things that you're raising. And we could also request a certain level of outreach between now and then to get these voices.
Okay, I agree, but I think the concern is that there wasn't a lot of neighborhood input other than Barbara's voice and me being out there in the land use world. But I think we need to have public forums, tell people what it is and how that needs to be a piece. So those are I addressed the concerns of DRAC about the equity and the funding and how it would affect affordable housing that comes after. That was a big one. And then the question of who really pays. You know, if we're paying, if it is the difference between $9,000 and $1,000 is $5,000. How is that $5,000 going to be absorbed into the process, and why not share that cost with the industry with an incentive with some other? Because right now it's laser focused on the development industry, and I think that they can surely be a participant in the process, but I think it's going to do is add to the cost of affordable housing, and there's other ways to get at that, incentivizing people to do deconstruction. So
Great.
I think that's.
Thank you very much. So questions for this panel? Thank you all very much. So let's turn to public testimony, and folks come on up. And again, obviously we have a great deal of information already, so if what you've already heard answers your concerns, feel free to be brief.
We have 21 people signed up.
Okay.
The first 3, please come on up, are Terry Parker, Jim Brown, and John Sandy, and they'll be followed by Al Ellis, Margaret Davis, and Scott Yelton.
Thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Terry Parker. I'm a 4th-generation Portlander, and today I'm speaking as a member of the steering committee of UNR. For a city that prides itself promoting reuse and recycling, why does this resolution still allow single-family homes built after 1960 to be mechanically demolished with reusable materials literally being crushed using a diesel smoke-belching excavator? The delay in fully implementing a deconstruction mandate appears to be a development community claptrap fabrication that suggests the deconstruction and reusing building materials industry will fall short. The preservation of existing homes needs to be top priority. However, when a home is slated for removal, the sustainability and preservation tools are found within the deconstruction toolbox. The reuse of building materials lessens the need for new raw materials, including new lumber from growing trees, while preserving historical artifacts such as period window frames, interior moldings and trim, and other materials of character that otherwise could not be replaced. The marketplace for these products currently has an unmet demand for both restoration and repair work and for repurposing uses. There is also a need for more livable wage jobs within the community. As compared to mechanical demolition, deconstruction can create significantly more jobs, including entry-level jobs that can lead to higher paying jobs. With a truck, some tools, the proper training, and the will to work hard, deconstruction supports the creation of numerous small family and minority businesses that in theory could even dominate the local deconstruction industry. In the 1920s, Portland was in the midst of a new home building boom. These homes are of high quality construction built with old growth lumber. Extending and amending the deconstruction mandate to include homes built in the years from 1917 to 1930 cannot come soon enough. It is a crime not to preserve the irreplaceable lumber and reuse of materials from these homes. Instead of accepting delay and waiting a year or two after an effective date of October 16 to take the next step, a fast-paced track to full implementation of the deconstruction mandate should be viewed as an opportunity to both create new jobs and add even more vibrancy to an already thriving reuse marketplace. The City Council needs to pass this resolution and take the field of dreams approach, require deconstruction, promote the reuse of deconstruction materials, assist in early training, and then watch the industry soar to new heights. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
I'm Jim Brown. Address for the last 36 years is 3407 Northeast 27th. I've lived in the Grant High School area for about 70 years. I recently retired from 5 years as Land Use Committee Chairman for Alameda Neighborhood Association. Our most frequent contacts from homeowners concerned destruction of livable homes and construction of new homes that appear out of character for the neighborhood. That said, certainly demolition of a perfectly good house is a waste. What is worse, the waste is compounded by the current practice of smashing and trashing. Homes built in the 1920s and even some up to the 1950s contain old-growth Douglas fir lumber. Deconstruction yields wood of a quality that is not available from today's commercial forests. This old wood is denser and stronger, has a higher resin content, and is more durable. Present-day lumber comes from trees that are farmed, managed to grow quickly, and often harvested at an age of as little as 40 years. Today's lumber is adequate to meet current structural standards, but is not fine-grained. Large old-growth posts and beams from deconstruction are resurfaced and reused for structural purposes, often left exposed for their unique appearance. Smaller lumber is reused, remilled, and/or repurposed by local small businesses to manufacture furniture, moldings, and cabinets. I am told the market for products made from this wood is strong and growing as customers learn of the unique quality and look of old-growth wood. I urge the Council to develop regulations that will encourage and increase the use of this resource. The minimum date of 1916 should be ramped up as deconstruction capacity grows. Perhaps a few more trees will remain growing in our forests.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
John Sandy. I'm a resident of Northeast Portland. And a couple of personal things that I've been involved with this discussion today. One, I recently built a dining room table with materials from the rebuilding center that can sit my 12 members of my extended family. And I recently had a home that was torn down right behind me, and it was deconstructed, and myself and my neighbors slept much more peacefully knowing that it was deconstructed. My emphasis talking today is on the hazardous materials. Back in December 2014, as part of a UNR, I focused on that and brought up a couple studies talking about, HUD studies that talked about the spread of the lead dust from sites up to 300 feet and concentrations above that. So that started these studies, and I referred to these studies in my talk, and please, that sparked my passion for the hazardous materials focus that I've given on this subject for the last 15 months or so. What has occurred, and well, the highlights of that, two things. One, Those studies said proper wetting, two simple things, biggest thing, proper wetting and partial deconstruction of the high lead concentrated windows trim and that were the biggest factors to reduce that spread into the nearby lots. Those two factors. We're talking about one of those today. What has occurred since December 2014? One, the Bureau of Development Services has instituted the self-certification by contractors to follow the rules. Unfortunately, that has been shown to be woefully ineffective with recent data from the DEQ as analyzed by the Oregonian showing 65% non-conformance levels when you're talking about asbestos abatement and demolitions in Portland. 65%. Obviously, the honor system is not working too well. What else has occurred? Citizens have promoted through the legislation SB 705, which is the asbestos survey for single-family houses. UNR and activists are working with the DEQ to put some teeth into this. Right now, as we talked about earlier, they can request this. We would like to see verification. We need verification. This should be surveys and should be available before a permit is issued as we started to talk about what can we do. So after 15 months of knowing the potential risk to public health, and this brings up some of the other things that were said earlier, nothing concrete has been done to mitigate the risk. It's 15 months. With the recent national and local issues around it, I would hope the City Council would take that to heart and institute simple, urgent requirements. Full deconstruction is the surest way, but at the very minimum, partial deconstruction coupled with proper abatement and adequate debris wetting should be verified with on-site inspections. So to fill the gap between the economics capacity to create full deconstruction, we should at least take this intermediate step of partial deconstruction and such. So I think most of the other things have been covered, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you very much.
In my written comments, I failed to mention I am serving on the UNR steering committee.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Jim.
Next three are Al Ellis, Margaret Davis, and Scott Yelton, and they'll be followed by Doug Lichtor, Preston Browning, and David Vinnick.
Come on up. Go ahead.
Okay, well, my name's Al Ellis, and I'm one of those elders that fills up my retirement time with volunteer work, and I'm involved in three organizations. One is the Portland Combado Sister City Association. I'm president of that Sister City Association, but we're not here to talk about the Russian Far East. We're here to talk about the welfare of our neighborhoods here in Portland. The other two organizations are neighborhood organizations. One is the Beaumont-Wilshire Neighborhood Association. I used to be president of that. Now I'm editor of the newsletter. And the other is the organization, the grassroots organization that I co-founded a few years ago, the UNR, the United Neighborhoods for Reform. I serve as UNR's representative on DRAC's demolition subcommittee. So you heard from the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability that there's been an average of 300 Portland homes demolished the past 2 years. And whether this constitutes a demolition epidemic is up for debate. But there's no denying that many viable, contextually compatible homes have fallen victim to this wave of destruction, with Portland residents bearing the resultant environmental costs. BPS concludes that, quote, demolition of housing has raised community concerns about housing affordability, health, waste, and neighborhood character. And I was at a RIPSAC meeting a couple weeks ago, or a few weeks ago, the Infill Reform Committee that the mayor has initiated. And the mayor spoke to this committee, and he basically said that these concerns that I just mentioned are part of it, or comprise his Hippocratic oath, really, to do something about these things. And it's these very concerns that gave rise to UNR. It's been endorsed by 43 neighborhood associations, and with a shared tenet that destroying the village in order to save it is never, the wise policy. A central plank of our resolution, our demolition development resolution, deals with environmental fallout from demolitions. And it's a logical extension that deconstruction is the way to go. The proposed legislation before you today is a step forward in addressing the impacts associated with waste generated by demolitions, and hopefully the beginning of a path that will fulfill our UNR's ultimate objective, which would be mandated deconstruction for all residential demolitions. So I think there's a sense of urgency here. Just as there's a sense of urgency on the global warming front, there's a sense of urgency in Southeast Portland. There should be a sense of urgency on this issue. And I encourage you to expand expand to 1930 at least, to cover homes that were built, at that point, because right now, 1916 leaves out so many homes that were destroyed and will be destroyed. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Margaret Davis. I work with United Neighborhoods for Reform, and I also live in Northeast Portland. I'm betting that most of you up there recycle. I'm betting that most of us here recycle. We do it because it's the right thing to do. And nobody pays us to take that extra effort to go over and put our recyclables in the special recycling bin and schlep that down the driveway. We recycle because it's the right thing to do. And we can recycle whole houses because it's the right thing to do. I've handed out a Metro report that was published in December. And for the first time in nearly a decade, we've registered a decline in our recovery rate, and that is the materials not going to the landfill. 2 of the 3 materials that were part of that decline are wood and scrap metal. And those 2 materials are attributed to the construction industry. There used to be a pulp mill in Newburgh that burned all of our vintage homes. That closed in October. So I think you're going to see a much deeper decline in our recovery rate starting from now if all these homes are headed to the landfill instead of to that pulp mill where they used to be burned. We can save these materials. We have a great ready market, and you'll hear from them, some of those salvage experts, and you already have. Most of all, we avoid our hazmat release. And I don't think anybody should be breathing lead or asbestos, certainly not our kids. And no neighbors to these demolition sites should breathe or come into contact with any of these hazardous materials. If you look at Bullseye Glass and the other glass factory in North Portland, no one's paying them not to use arsenic or cadmium in their recipes. For the same reason, I don't think we should have to pay to not breathe the asbestos and the lead issuing from these demolition sites. I believe these costs rest with the people responsible for releasing these hazardous materials. I don't think we can share the costs. I think the costs belong to the people profiting. And I think the costs, if they're added and they don't make affordable housing, I don't think they're making affordable housing. You had Randy Sebastian sitting here before saying the average cost of the homes that he builds are $700,000. In Beaumont-Wilshire, we did a study of 2 years of homes that were demolished, and the replacements were 2.4 times as expensive. So if you want affordable homes, you keep the homes that are there. You don't demolish them. And if you do demolish them, you must deconstruct on your own dime. We've been here a lot in the last year and a half. We're anxious for any measure that prevents the loss in our neighborhoods of quality, old growth materials and construction, homes that were modestly sized, that people could age in place in for decades, homes that sheltered generations of Portlanders, and they can shelter many more. So this is another chance to stem that loss and to stop wasting Portland. We hope you'll take it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. Okay, let's take the next.
Doug Lector, Preston Browning and David Bennick. And they'll be followed by Jordan, Sarah Badiali, and Natalie Perrin.
Good afternoon. My name is Doug Lichter. I'm a resident of Southeast Portland. I'm also the department manager for deconstruction services of the Rebuilding Center and have been for the past 8 years. We're very excited in this industry to think that that you folks might endorse and pass this resolution. We'd like to think that we can take this tremendous step towards deconstructing the majority of the buildings eventually that come down in this town, and make a mark nationwide as having been the first to enact this kind of a policy. One of the things we're really excited about is the opportunities that will be afforded to additional companies to engage in this work. From everything you've heard today, we're going to require a minimum of 25, if not 40, additional participants to deconstruct these buildings. And these will be skilled tradespeople who have gone through an apprenticeship program, who know what they're doing, who have OSHA training, who know how to work safely, who know how to work in concert with a team, identify hazardous materials. Currently, if you were to Google deconstruction in Portland, only 2 firms would come up, both Deconstruction Services of the Rebuilding Center and Lovett Deconstruction. There's room for the growth of additional companies to do this work in this marketplace. We can't accommodate between the 2 of us all the additional houses coming in. So we're very excited at the prospect of a rising tide, as it were, of additional firms who can engage in this, pay their staff living wages, do good work, reclaim these materials for reuse, and encourage you to pass this resolution. So thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hello, my name is Preston Browning. I'm the owner and founder of Salvage Works in North Portland. We're a retailer of reclaimed lumber. I spoke to you some in June, so thank you for having me back, and thank you all for hearing and considering this important resolution. I told you in June that my business was growing, and I had just hired my 10th employee. Well, in less than a year, I've just hired my 13th and 14th employees. I really see this as a huge boon for, a small but a lot of potential for growth industry, a niche, as it were. And I think that there's a real trickle-down effect here for economics and job creation. And maybe it's trickle-up because the increased deconstruction, obviously there's jobs there. And then there's increased jobs on the retail of that material. And then the increased in the jobs of the fabrication of people making products from this material. A lot of our customers are fabricators that do specialized work here in Portland, and they're building trade show booths. I'm talking about the 2,000 square foot booths that go to the shoe show in Vegas, that kind of thing, for Nike or Timberland or Danner. They come to us for their materials, and I often can't supply the volume that they need. So I see that this resolution and requirement will really add to, the economics that we're talking about. And, there's a real room for sort of an export market for this material. I believe that it is, will continue to, and this has been said, but I think it's important, that it'll continue to put Portland on the map as a progressive and forward-thinking city. So I would strongly encourage you all to pass this resolution. I will also encourage the resolution to be passed as is. Believe me, I understand the desire to salvage more of these houses. I do have concerns about the industry, and I'm Commissioner Fritz. I'm absolutely happy for competition. I think there's a lot of room here for that, and I don't think it will affect my business. But
I do have concerns about a glut of that material, and that can, if there's not a value in that material, it will raise the cost of deconstructions that much more, because deconstruction contractors or nonprofits are relying on the income of that. And then also, I would hate to see a deconstruction happen and then that material get tossed away anyway because there wasn't a market for it. Thanks again, and it's great.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Welcome.
Hello, my name is David Bennick, and I'm from Bellingham, Washington, so I'm going to give you another perspective than the local groups. I'm a deconstruction consultant and contractor. I travel all around the United States and Canada performing this work. Now, I've been doing this for 23 years, and seems like 40 years. And I've been to 42 states and 4 provinces, so I get to see what everybody's doing and their different perspectives. And I'm really impressed with everybody here. And actually, we're all, I said, around the country, I've said it before, that people are looking at Portland and they're impressed, with what's happening here and the progressive measures that you're taking to protect your citizens and things like that. So now we couldn't wait for an ordinance to be passed, so we just started doing deconstruction. And we, I've done 900 buildings. So I've also been involved in about 3,000 total projects. So, you don't always have to deconstruct. Like a lot of people were saying here, you might just gut out the building and then use that building. You might want it remodeled, but you don't always have to get rid of it. So, and I've proven that, of course, by doing work in that limited scope. So one of the things we've done was we did it in unsubsidized scenarios where we were doing it under regular market conditions. We didn't have grants from the government. We didn't have volunteers. We didn't have anything helping us out. We were just going kind of toe-to-toe with demolition contractors and winning. To my clients, and I do my training, they kind of look at us as a role model and say, what are you doing, Dave? What do you think about this type of building? What do you think about this project? And if I reject a certain project or a certain type of building, then it's almost like they all are going to follow in that and reject it. So it's really important to me that I push the limits, and that's what I've done in a lot of inner city job training and taking down buildings with lower value, things like that, not just going after the really high value buildings. I think Portland is doing that as well, where you're serving as a role model for other parts of the country, whether you know it or not, because I'm in other parts of the country asking. And so what I'm seeing is that when you do something good here, you make an effort and somebody follows you, then whatever good you've done has then been magnified by whatever good happens in that community, because they are looking to you first, and you're the test subject. Maybe if it works for you, then they'll follow you. So that's an important point. One of the other things that we deal with are time and money. People don't want to they don't want us to take too much time. They don't want it to cost too much. So we're constantly faced with that issue. We've been able to get projects down to 3 or 4 days, and we've got the cost about similar to demolition. And you could say, well, that's not what we've heard today. Well, wait about 900 projects, and then you'll see that, maybe we could get that down. And one of the trainings we do is to try and accomplish that. So
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next 3 are Jordan, Sarah Badiali, and Natalie Perrin. And they'll be followed by Ben Gates, Luby Wind, and the person who signed up after Luby at the same address.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mayor Hales, members of the council. My name is Jordan, and I represent Earth Advantage, located at 623 Southwest Oak Street here in Portland. I also serve on the city's Deconstruction Advisory Group. Earth Advantage is a Portland-based nonprofit that works with the building industry to help implement sustainable building practices. Our mission is to advance green building science and create an immediate, practical, and cost-effective path to sustainability and reduction of carbon in the built environment. We've recently partnered with Metro to develop a program that, beginning next month, will provide consultation and material brokerage service to builders and developers in the Metro region with the aim of facilitating greater rates of salvage, of deconstruction and salvage of reusable materials. It's our belief that for a project that requires replacement of an existing building to be truly green, responsible removal of that building and maximum reuse of viable building materials is necessary. Deconstruction provides a path to those outcomes, diverting waste from local landfills, reducing waste of embodied energy and emission of carbon, protecting neighboring properties from dispersal of hazardous materials, and passing quality reusable materials forward into productive use. Deconstruction and salvage can also drive local economic development, as you've heard, creating 6 to 8 jobs for every traditional demolition job, providing a growing salvage material market with the products it needs to thrive, and offering the community affordable options for acquiring quality used materials. Deconstruction allows us to keep our history out of the landfill. I think most of us feel a visceral reaction when we see an older home demolished. And the traditional crunch and dump method of removal feels like insult added to injury. It feels like we're losing something because we are. There's a history and culture in our older buildings, and too often it's literally being thrown away. And while in rare instances concerned neighbors have successfully intervened to keep a threatened home intact, in most cases deconstruction provides the best opportunity to save the irreplaceable material culture that is typically thrown away when older buildings are removed. The resolution before you represents an opportunity for the city to advance a number of stated planning goals and help to level the playing field for builders who have voluntarily chosen to deconstruct. If adopted, Earth Advantage will work to ensure that the growing supply of locally deconstructed materials will find new homes. Thank you for your leadership.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hi. Thank you for having me. My name is Sarah Battiali, and I've been working in deconstruction since 2005. In 2014, I was the board chair for the Building Material Reuse Association, a national membership organization for furthering building material reuse and deconstruction. The Deconstruction Advisory Committee proposal is achievable. We have thousands of unemployed Oregonians, as you've heard, who can be trained in deconstruction, including unemployed veterans already skilled in teamwork, physical labor, and communication that are perfectly poised to learn to safely and efficiently unbuild buildings. We currently have deconstruction training outlets for women and minorities in organizations like Oregon Tradesmen, which you've already heard about. Unemployment resources like WorkSource Oregon are in position to direct people seeking training in deconstruction. The Building Material Reuse Association has a comprehensive deconstruction training curriculum that has been created by national professionals in the field. Building deconstruction is a gateway skill to trades like electrical, plumbing, and construction, and is a foundation for life work, not just employment. Portland has the resources for market growth in salvaged and reclaimed building materials. Since 2011, I have been cataloging news and resources in building material reuse on my website, the Reclamation Administration. There are thousands of posts about businesses spanning all levels of industry using reclaimed materials. Corporations like Starbucks, who now only design cafe interiors with reclaimed materials, to Fender, who just released a series of guitars in old-growth wood. There are craftspeople in cottage industries making everything from laptop cases to tiny houses in reclaimed materials. The salvage wood furniture and interior design industry is worth millions in the United States, but also in Japan. The Japanese buy reclaimed wood and architectural salvage from the United States starting on the West Coast. Portland's creative class and entrepreneurs are in a position to make great things with materials saved from our houses. We want those materials, and we wouldn't want to jeopardize our health, safety, and liberty to get at 100-year-old wood from a demolition site. A table made from old-growth wood can feed a craftsperson for a month. Not only can we absorb a glut in the market from reclaimed materials, we can turn it around and produce groundbreaking products. Just give us the chance by passing the deconstruction resolution. Portlanders have always been leaders in sustainability and creativity. The nation and the world looks to us for innovation, and we're on the cusp of making history with this resolution. My sincere thanks for the opportunity to testify and by serving on the Deconstruction Advisory Group. And I wanted to add one more thing. When we talk about health, we often talk about air quality. And one of the things we don't talk about is water quality. We're using clean water to keep emissions from these dust, and we are actually putting clean water on buildings to keep things like lead and asbestos into the groundwater. And there are also other chemicals that come from hosing down buildings, like benzene, which is a derivative of natural gas. And when this stuff doesn't get filtered out, like if the demolition companies are not putting filters in the storm drains, then that water goes right into our water table. So I just wanted to add that one more thing. So thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Natalie Perrin. I'm president of the board of directors at Restore Oregon at 1130 Southwest Morrison Street, number 31A. Restore Oregon staff have been on the Deconstruction Advisory Group since its formation a year ago. Through that involvement, we worked with Bureau planning staff and other stakeholders to ensure that historic resources were adequately considered in the drafting of this resolution. While it is Restore Oregon's position that historic resources should be preserved and maintained intact, requiring deconstruction would serve as a small disincentive to removing significant houses from the city's landscape. In fact, this is not a new idea. Since 2002, the zoning code has required that would-be demolishers of historic resources respond in writing to all offers to salvage building elements before demolition. While salvaging historic buildings is never as preferable as preserving them, requiring deconstruction would reduce some of the external costs of teardown in cases where demolition cannot be prevented. While Restore Oregon believes there are many opportunities to expand and strengthen the city's historic preservation program, we support the resolution in front of you as a tool to discourage the demolition of otherwise viable historic resources. And I also wanted to address one other question that Commissioner Fritz had earlier regarding which properties would be included in this resolution. And as I understand it, historic resources are those defined that are on the National Register, local landmarks, conservation landmarks, and the historic resource inventory, either individually or as part of a district, which you had asked earlier about whether or not the conservation properties, if they were contributing to a conservation district, would qualify.
Okay, we'll clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And speaking of apprenticeship, thank you for training the excellent new historic resources planner that now is working for the city of
I
Portland.
wasn't going to mention it, but since you're going to drive that, you are very lucky to have him. He's going to be quite a boon to the city.
Thank you. And our apologies for the theft.
The next
Okay,
three
next.
are Ben Gates, Luby Wind, and the person who signed up after Luby at the same address.
Yeah, okay, so these are.
And they will be followed by Chloe Udele, Jordan Palmieri, and Paul Grove.
Welcome. Good afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners, for the opportunity to testify in support of the deconstruction resolution. My name is Ben Gates, owner of Urban Patterns, a Portland-based company that provides real estate development services to private and nonprofit owners. I'm also a member of the Deconstruction Advisory Group and a board member of the Rebuilding Center. A substantial number of our clients, landlords, tenants, and owner-occupants, elect to use salvage material in our projects. Recently, a new startup and a local food industry incubator. Now, a lot has been mentioned about the benefits of deconstruction, so I'm going to abbreviate my testimony and don't have to reiterate that. But just wanted to highlight that there is a substantial demand for salvage material, and increasing our deconstruction efforts will have a positive effect in supporting an increased supply in quality, affordable materials that we can repurpose into buildings. We see this demand in our projects. Our clients are asking for it. And in addition, we're excited about the economic growth opportunities. In our work, we look to grow and incubate small businesses, minority-owned, women-owned, emerging small businesses, and also we look to work with those who provide job training opportunities to low-income communities and local communities. So we're excited about this growth potential. We think that increased deconstruction activity will allow the industry to retool, hire, and train employees, and we know that for every one demolition job, 6 are created in deconstruction. So again, we can grow businesses that repurpose salvage materials and provide affordable quality materials, and we can also increase the health of our communities by diverting materials, often hazardous, from the landfill. So thank you for your leadership in pursuing this resolution and the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Great. Thank you, Mayor Hales and the council for the opportunity to speak today and to show our support for this very important resolution. I would like to speak specifically in regards to job creation.
Name in the record, too.
Oh, sorry.
Just put your name in the record, too.
Okay, my name is Luby Wind, and I serve as the Employment Navigator at Mercy Corps Northwest Reentry Transition Center in Northeast Portland. And I want to speak specifically to the boots on the ground that Sean was talking about earlier. The RTC has been operating for 6 years, and we exist to help individuals released from incarceration to become responsible citizens of society. The work we do, along with our community partners, serve over 1,000 individuals per year, find and use resources, and we have saved the state of Oregon an estimated $8 for every $1 spent on our services. My job specifically is to advocate for and to assist individuals find employment and keep it. Meaningful employment, which I believe this project will bring, is one in which a worker receives fair livable earnings, benefits, and a connection to a collective purpose. This is a cornerstone of successful reintegration and positive change following a length of incarceration. It is a well-known fact that the ability to engage in work has a strong impact on preventing or reducing recidivism. More than anything, our clients need the opportunity to connect in a workplace in a beneficial and in a meaningful way. Meaningful employment goes much further than what we often hear of as a survival job. The Rebuilding Center's plan, and I believe BPS, is to train and employ workers in the deconstruction of homes. This is not simply a survival job. Careful, safe, and professional deconstruction runs parallel to our clients' efforts in reconstructing their lives. These are sustainable opportunities that offer an integrated learning environment where future carpenters, plumbers, tradespeople, general laborers can learn skills and abilities and prepare them for future careers in the trades. We are really pleased to have the opportunity, if this resolution and ordinance passes, to collaborate with the Rebuilding Center and who happens to be a second chance employer, and to provide a path to training and employment for job seekers who are in reentry. On a related subject, if I have time, I want to thank the council and the mayor for your leadership on behalf of our hundreds of volunteers and our thousands of clients and our staff for your leadership in passing the Ban the Box ordinance. This went a long way to paving the way to removing the stigma of incarceration or previous incarceration. We now ask you to pass this resolution for the Rebuilding Center and the RTC to create employment opportunities for Anthony here, who will speak next.
Welcome.
Hello, everyone. My name is Anthony Rutherford, and I am a volunteer representing Mercy Courts on deconstruction versus demolition process. I have been working construction for over 10 years and have seen many of the ins and outs of demolition. I became interested in deconstruction because I do remodeling projects and they call for reusing all materials possible. It only makes sense why destroy when we can recycle. All across our nation, we encourage Americans to recycle just about everything we purchase from our local stores, which includes paper, plastic, and glass. So why not recycle building materials? I've read the extra cost from deconstruction is recouped or surpassed by taking advantages of tax deductions for donating or selling materials saved during this process. Deconstruction also diverts tons of wasted materials from the landfills. Local activists does not have to worry about hazardous materials with deconstruction because proper steps and training are done first. Deconstruction also keeps our environment intact, provides employment, help homeowners save materials by donating to nonprofit organizations, and the builders get certified training and learn new skills for higher rates of pay. I am one of the underrepresented people here, and I actually struggle from felony background records. And where I'm from, second chance is a real big problem. So our nation suffers from recidivism because our system prosecutes instead of rehabilitates. And prove to ourselves and our families that we can succeed.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Next three are Chloe Udele, Jordan Palmieri, and Paul Grove. And then the last three who signed up are Harriet Roth, Jeff Fish, and Gabe Bott.
Come on up. Welcome. Who wants to be first?
I'll go. Hi, my name's Chloe Daly. I've been writing and rewriting my testimony as I've been listening to everyone, hoping to present slightly new perspective. I'm here to give testimony in support of this resolution as an affordable housing advocate, a fan and neighbor of the Rebuilding Center, and a concerned citizen. Last year, PSU researchers shared the somewhat alarming results of their multi-year study, which revealed Portland's hottest and most polluted areas. They're now hard at work on coming up with solutions. We should all be doing everything within our power to reduce environmental hazards and health risks to our residents, and we should be regulating environmental impact across all industries, whether it's glass manufacturing or property development. The greenest home is the one that already exists, and as we saw earlier, it's also the most affordable home. If we cannot preserve these greener and more affordable homes, we should at least be requiring developers to take the most responsible path to taking them down. The decision to waste energy, increase pollution, and add tons of reusable materials to our landfills shouldn't be a choice. The majority of Portland residents are not benefiting from our development boom. In fact, they are suffering from it in the form of rising rents, displaced growth forests that we will not see again in our lifetimes. Short of saving them, deconstruction is the most fitting final tribute to these historic buildings, and reusing these materials is a way to honor and enjoy them for generations to come. I agree with Commissioner Fritz and others who would like to see the range expanded to include homes built in 1930 as quickly as possible, and I would prefer to see developers bear the cost rather than be funded by grants. But this resolution is a step in the right direction. Thank you for the opportunity to give testimony today and for your leadership.
Thank you. Welcome.
Mayor Hales, City Commissioners, my name is Jordan Palmieri, and I work in the Green Building Program at the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality. My work focuses on reducing the life cycle environmental impacts of building materials. I'm here today to help highlight the environmental benefits of deconstruction and material reuse. For most building materials, such as lumber, cabinets, light fixtures, windows, and doors, the vast majority of the environmental impacts caused by these materials occur during their production, not their disposal. Therefore, the largest environmental benefits of reuse are not avoiding the disposal impacts, but instead avoiding the production of new materials. From a carbon perspective, DEQ research shows that the deconstruction and reuse of materials from a single-family home has a 2 to 3 times increase in carbon reductions compared to demolition. Other environmental impacts to air, water, and land can also be reduced through building material reuse and the subsequent decreased demand for new products. Additionally, it is the policy of the state of Oregon to prioritize material reuse over recycling, composting, and burning for energy recovery and landfilling. Oregon is a leader in the field of materials management, and DEQ's 2050 vision for materials management calls for Oregonians in the year 2050 to produce and use materials responsibly, conserving resources, protecting the environment, and living well. Part of achieving this vision is that when materials are no longer wanted, they are recovered for their next highest and best use. The city's climate action plan commits the city to partnering with DEQ to implement the 2050 vision for materials management. The deconstruction resolution you're considering today is a commendable step to conserving resources, protecting the environment, and living well. Thanks so much for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you. Welcome.
Mayor Hales, members of council, for the record, Paul Grove with the Portland Home Builders. Thank you for the opportunity to provide comment today. I want to start off, and I'm not being trite in saying this, we all want to promote policies and practices that are environmentally friendly and support our sustainable objectives. And frankly, at the HBA, through our sustainability education programs, through our lead-based training programs, we've taken a leadership position on some of these issues in the residential industry. And I think, as was noted in previous testimony, particularly around lead-based paint and other stuff, there are some additional opportunities on this front around enhancement of particular training programs. I wanted to spotlight 3 to 4 issues that were already noted today, and I don't want to belabor the point. The first is the cost, and as previous testimony had noted, the costs do indeed vary, and we heard some folks talk on the low end of what those costs might be. Our Infill group, when talking with them, noted that the additional costs were, approximately $8,000 to $10,000. Again, it varies by site, et cetera. I'm not saying anything that council does not know. I think as we move forward in the process and have these discussions, we would ask that we have a conversation around an incentive program to help mitigate those additional costs, recognizing that oftentimes these are passed on to the end user, to the home buyer, and we want to ensure housing affordability. So as we move forward in the process, we would look to have that conversation around what a potential incentive looks like and a potentially sustainable funding source as well on that front, if this is indeed a path that we go down. The second issue that was talked about involved capacity. These are my terms, not those that were used earlier, but I've categorized it as institutional capacity and the workforce component. We talked about the firms, and I think we want to be sure that there's a limited number of firms that are doing this work today. They have acknowledged, or they believe that they can assume the additional work, but there is a ramp-up period, and I would echo the comments that would support a feasibility analysis on this front to ensure that there is not a glut, to ensure that we can accommodate the increase in materials that we would realize. The second piece is the workforce piece, and I think there's great opportunity on this front to have a robust and comprehensive workforce development program that provides career pathways along the way. This isn't unique to deconstruction. Our industry is facing a shortage of framers and other workers. We think this is something that has transitional skills. We'd love to be a partner in the development of a workforce curriculum at the end of the day. This does indeed take time, but I think there's great opportunity to, again, provide those career pathways for folks moving forward. And then the last thing I would highlight is around the timing, and I know that the current resolution notes October 31 implementation date, effective date, if you will. I think it's important that we address and understand these foundational issues first before we move forward with an October 31 implementation date, effective date. The last thing we want to do is move forward with a proposal that isn't completely fleshed out, that haven't fully articulated and addressed the underlying issues, and we don't want to see a proposal move forward that is set up to fail. So with that, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
I have a question. That 8,000 to 10,000 number, is that the net cost of deconstruction compared with the cost of tipping and the amount that you get for selling the materials?
It's my understanding that, and I have to get back with you, Commissioner Fritz. I would be remiss if I answered that right now. So let me follow up
Maybe that's a
accordingly.
question for staff, but
Sure.
I'd just be interested in Commissioner Fisher or others have mentioned about recycling. One of the reasons that we recycle a lot is because otherwise we're paying extra for putting more in the garbage. So I'd be interested to know the relative costs.
I'll certainly follow up.
Mayor, can I just ask a question? I know we're running out of time, but, Mr. Grove, you're fairly new in this role, and at least in testifying here, and I would say that I can think of this is the third or fourth time that someone from the home builders locally has come, whether it's the tax abatement programs, demolition fee, or this, where you've come, laid out reasonable and thoughtful concerns that you and your members share, and you've asked us to consider them in the legislative process, which I think is perfectly valid. And I just want to say to you, I am profoundly disappointed that this body has not received in writing from your organization why you're trying to block the number one legislative priority of this council in Salem, which is inclusionary housing. And if there is a view that the organization has that there is some reason why we should not be able to have that tool, I would simply ask you, in the spirit in which you have and your predecessor has come before us and laid out concerns with every other piece of legislation we've taken up, that you give us the courtesy of putting in writing what those concerns are, and that we don't keep running down to Salem finding out that you and the realtors and some other groups are trying to kill the number one legislative priority of this city. And I would ask you to seriously consider both your strategy and in how you engage this council, including laying out in the same detail you're laying out, I think very thoughtfully now on this issue, why your organization feels that we should not have that authority.
Please do get back to us on that. Thank you. Okay, next three.
Are Harriet Roth, Jeff Fish, and Gabe Vaught.
Is that the last three?
That's the last three who signed up.
I was wondering, could I yield my time to Sean Davis? He came late.
Sure, that's fine.
Yeah,
that's fine. Come on up. Go ahead, Mr. Fish.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. And I may ask you for a little more time. I'm also on the Deconstruction Advisory Committee. I don't have prepared remarks. I want to address several different issues that have been brought up previously. Commissioner Fish, early in your discussion on this, you talked about maybe having to get the attorneys out and fight some of this issue as far as cleaning up the air. I'm speaking for myself, but as a member of the Home Builder Association for a lot of years, I think we're on board with this. The only question is the cost of the deconstruction and how that ought to be handled. I'll get to that in a minute. In response to your question to Mr. Grove, I haven't deconstructed a lot, but we did one in the summer solely because being on the Deconstruction Advisory Committee, I wanted to know what those costs were. We came at $9,000, give or take a couple of bucks, over the bid we had to demolish it. And in that $9,000, that was a net number. Levitt Deconstruction did the deconstruction. They sold the materials to, I'm not sure whom exactly they sold them, but they sold them to some of the material people. One of the frustrating things is we tore the siding off, which had lead-based paint, loaded in a drop box, shipped it to Newburgh at the time that had the hog fuel burner going, so burned it up there. You know, so we paid to take it off by hand and send it out there. Currently, that material is going to either Everett or Medford. Those are the two closest places to burn hog fuel. This committee, I've been on a lot of committees in this city for a long time. This committee is one of the better ones. I really interacted well with Stephen Reichard, Joe Connell, Preston Browning, a couple other people that are in that recycle business. And I would like you to listen to them when they say, take the first step first, and what they think they can get done. They bared their soul, and I felt, on what they could do as far as making this process work. My concern is that, for lack of a better term, that $9,000 net over what it costs to deconstruct. If any of you have had a mortgage on a house, you know that when that mortgage is in the process, there has to be an appraisal done on the property. If I go out and build, I'm going to pick a number, a $300,000 house, and I have to spend I'll round it to $10,000 for easy numbers. If I have to spend $10,000 more on that home to deconstruct it, yet my competitor around the corner is building on a vacant lot or demolishes a house with mechanical and spends $10,000 less, if I sell my house a month before, there's a comp for him. He can take advantage of the fact that my house sold for $310,000, his house is identical floor plan or close to it, his house will sell for $310,000, even though he doesn't have that additional $10,000 cost. And the used market in real estate's based on the new market. So if a neighbor's selling a 20-year-old house that's roughly the same square footage, that's going to drive his house up too. So it's going to increase our problem with affordable housing. I think that if we find a way, take these 150 houses, let's say $10,000 a house subsidy, if we can find a way to subsidize, that's $1.5 million. It's not chicken scratch, but in the scheme of things, it's not a lot of money either. So if we can find a subsidy measure to pay for the deconstruction, I think it'll keep the costs down to the general public, and we can get deconstruction done. And I think for the most part, I'm not gonna fight over the 2 days it cost me to demolish something versus 8 to 10 days. That's something I'm willing to accept the expense on, and I think most of the guys are that way out there too.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
By the way, if you have suggestions for incentives, either you've seen in other cities, incentives you want us to consider, or some offset, we have some time to do some rulemaking. I hope you furnish those to us, and you might have a good idea that we'd like to know about.
Yeah, I don't currently, but I'll sit down with Paul Grove and see if the HBA can come with something that works.
Okay, good. Thank you. Welcome.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, thank you so much for letting me be here to speak, and I appreciate your time. I'm not a member of the any
Put your name in the record again.
I'm sorry, Sean Davis. I'm not a member of a deconstruction council or part of the homeowners, builders. I'm a post commander for an American Legion on Northeast Portland, and I deal a lot with combat veterans that are coming back. And these combat veterans, while they're ready to come and start working, some of them are not ready for 9-to-5 jobs or offices. Deconstruction would be perfect for them. Getting them in there and having them be able to work with their hands outside would really benefit them a lot. You know, many of them come back and they may feel like they lack a purpose, and giving them this opportunity to do so, to really, reuse products, help the environment, it would really give them that purpose and give them a much needed job, because some of them just sit at home and don't do anything. So if we get them outside, it'd be great. On the other side of that, I'm also I'm the post commander of that American Legion that was given to us in 1947. And we're remodeling it right now. And if we can use, we're going to definitely use a lot of equipment from the rebuilding center. But I mean, it's cheaper to remodel, we're helping the environment, and we're getting combat veterans jobs. I think it's a win-win, so I'm here to support it.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you both. So I think we have some questions for staff before we vote, particularly on the subjects of historic and contributing structures and districts, right?
Yeah.
So we'd love to hear your thoughts about that as a potential change to the resolution.
So was the testimony that we heard accurate, that when the language in the resolution actually covers the contributing structures within conservation districts?
Contributing, exactly, not non-contributing.
Not non-contributing, but contributing, and as well as those that are actually designated.
Exactly. So it would mirror our historic demo delay and historic delay requirements in the zoning code, so it would apply to those exact same structures.
That's satisfying. Any other further questions for staff before we proceed? Thank you very much. Let's take a vote, please, on the resolution.
Thank you, Mayor and staff and Bureau of Planning and Sustainability for bringing this very nuanced, very carefully thought out. When Jeff Fish says that a committee has worked well, and he knows, and he's
Compliment.
Yes, indeed, that's a compliment worth having. So congratulations to staff. Clearly, you've heard a lot of interest in going further, and I'm persuaded from the testimony that your approach is the right one to start with 1916 and hopefully get further quicker. But this is a really good start, and thank you very much for coming up with it. Thanks to all the neighbors and the construction industry, the deconstruction industry, and others who have worked on this. I hope that it will actually result in fewer houses, old houses being demolished at all or deconstructed, and that would also be a benefit. So by doing it in the measured approach, we can nuance it better as we move forward. Thank you very much. Aye.
Mayor, thank you for bringing this forward. It's a very thoughtful proposal that's gotten a lot of community input, and obviously it's going to evolve over time. But we're gonna start here. And I thought some of the concerns even raised by the skeptics and the critics are valid, and we need to track that. And I think anytime we can soften the blow on folks of the cost, particularly at the lower end, we ought to be open to that. We should, if someone has a creative idea, I think we'd want to look at it. 15 years ago, I first started learning about deconstruction when the then Housing Authority of Portland deconstructed homes at what used to be called Columbia Villa, now New Columbia. And it's kind of exciting to learn about it. And they made a concerted effort to deconstruct. That technology has evolved. One of the things there are two things I love about this approach, Mayor. One is that it's in keeping with the city's green standards and values. And number two, I love the idea that we are in effect incentivizing an industry that's also going to meet some of the compelling employment needs we have, workforce needs in our community, and not just veterans that are struggling, but all kinds of people who through this are going to have a chance. So to me, it feels like a well-conceived first step. It has a lot of process getting to this point. It's consistent with our values, and it has some other dividends, which are really neat. And I think this council should wholeheartedly embrace this approach. And today, I'm very proud to vote aye.
Saltzman?
Well, thank you, staff, but also the Deconstruction Advisory Group. I'm very impressed with the balance in this proposal, taking into account sort of the needs to nurture what's still a young industry, the deconstruction industry. And I'm very heartened at the same time about sort of the glide path I think we all foresee for it. With Portland leading the way, we'll be putting people back to work or creating more jobs for people. And that's a really good thing. And then from an environmental point of view, I guess my instincts were also why 1912 or 1916, whatever the date is there. But I'm persuaded by the staff report and subsequent testimony we heard from the deconstruction industry that we've got to sort of do this in the right way if we're going to make sure that the vendors we want to be successful doing this are indeed successful in doing this. So I think there's always going to be room for further review and modification, but this is a great balanced starting point that's really going to make a difference. So thank you. Aye.
Novik?
There's an old quote that's misattributed to Vince Lombardi: winning isn't everything, it's the only thing. I wouldn't quite say climate isn't everything, it's the only thing, but I might come close. So I'm particularly persuaded by hearing that the difference between demolition and deconstruction is equivalent to taking 4 cars off the road for a year. So I'm very pleased to support this. I'm incredibly impressed by the amount of work that's gone into it. I too have been persuaded by the testimony that it's reasonable to start sort of small with the 1916 date. But I really appreciate everybody's work. Thank you so much. Aye.
Hales?
Let me just mention 3 things: context, process, and a little personal experience thrown in. Context. I spent 10 years in between my 2 chapters of public service working all over the country. And, there's some things about Portland that we all talk about and that they all know about. And there are things like light rail and urban growth boundaries. And those are good things. But there are a couple things about Portland that we know and that compare so favorably to other cities that don't get talked about as much. One is our park system. We have this amazing park system. Most other cities have a great park or 2. We have 200. It's undersold as a great thing about Portland. And the other thing, believe me, after walking over miles and miles of streets in other cities trying to figure out where a light rail or streetcar line should go, nobody has got the miles and miles and miles of streets full of great old houses that we have. We've got a few great old neighborhoods. There's Queen Anne in Seattle and over the Rhine and Cincinnati and so on, but nobody's got this. It's a treasure of incalculable value. And I think we have come to see how vulnerable it is during this recent wave of demolition. I know many of you have. It is a treasure, and we have to defend it. And this is an important step in doing that. Process. I think this hearing has illustrated what a great process this has been. So I want to thank the citizens who worked so hard in this committee and helping the Bureau do its work. And I want to thank Susan and Sean and Elisa, because this Bureau has a talent, as we've seen it again and again, of moving people together forward on progressive things. Yes, we have progressive values, but Susan, once again, you've figured out the right increment, whether it's recycling or green buildings or commercial energy benchmarking. You've done a great job of figuring out what the right step is and bringing people along to it. And this really illustrates that, so well done. And finally, a personal experience. I've told the story a few times about the house that my family built together for my parents when my dad retired. And we took the ruins of a mill built in 1776 that had been burned down by Phil Sheridan and left as a ruin. and rebuilt the stone walls, logged oaks on the property, milled them into posts and beams, and then floored the thing with 150-year-old heart pine boards out of a factory in Lignum, Virginia, that somebody took the trouble to carefully deconstruct because nobody could ever find dense red heart pine like that because it doesn't exist anymore. And I still have the memory of drilling thousands of holes into those boards and screwing them down to the subfloor. But my kids grew up playing on those floors, and now somebody else's kids will do that and their grandkids, and that floor is going to be around for a really long time because my dad built a house you could land a 747 on and it would survive. But just the memory of the value of that material, again, incalculable because it can't be replicated, is powerful to me, and it will be powerful to people that get to live in good buildings or work in cool offices with materials that have been thoughtfully salvaged from old homes, a few of which are deconstructed in this city in the years ahead. Well done. Aye. Thank you all.
Thank you
And
very
we're
much.
adjourned.
Thank you.